Chapter 1229. Bai Qingqian's voice was a little absent-minded. When Li Tianlan heard the content of this sentence, he suddenly felt that it was extremely absurd. But this possibility did exist. This might be the only possibility. In the current situation, who could help the academy keep Liaodong? The prince group couldn't. They were now in a mess internally and were powerless. Moreover, the incident in Liaodong was complicated and confusing. If they didn't see the truth clearly, they might get into trouble if they rashly intervened. The prince group couldn't take action. The southeast group was powerful, but in the face of Wang Qinglei, a big threat, and Wu Yu, who was more important to them than the academy in Liaodong, they wouldn't have time to pay attention to the academics. The prince group wouldn't take action. Zhou Yunhai's attitude toward the north group had always been subtle. But even if they betrayed the good relationship with the current new group, their strength was not enough to change the outcome of this matter. Special Warfare Group. Haha. Now, the Special Warfare Group existed in name only and was basically a joke. The academics couldn't protect Liaodong at the moment. So no matter what, in any situation, the only way for the academy to protect Liaodong was to get Li Tianlan support. As the flag figure of the new group, Bai Qingqian was in charge of Liaodong and could get all the information. If Li Tianlan wanted to help Li Huaqing suppress the matter, he had a specific direction of operation and also powerful strength. As long as Li Tianlan didn't support it, no matter what the academy did, it couldn't protect Liaodong. What was this? Li Tianlan couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. Now he and Li Huaqing were at loggerheads, and the academy and the new group were at loggerheads. Li Huaqing actually thought that he would help him in the end. I'm afraid he's not a fool, Li Tianlan said subconsciously. Bai Qingqian was obviously stunned for a while, and then she laughed. Li Huaqing has been in Zhongzhou State for decades. I'm afraid you're the first person to say that about him. I know he's not stupid, Li Tianlan said lightly. But the problem is he's not stupid. Why is he so confident? Now, there's a rumor in Zhongzhou State. You should have heard it? Bai Qingqian suddenly asked. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. We all know very well that Li Huaqing is not someone who is good at taking risks. Bai Qingqian said softly. He has never been a strong president. This time, he suddenly went to Tiannan. It seemed aggressive, but in fact, under the current circumstances, only when he is in Emperor Dong's palace will there be enough space between us. Right now, the two of us are fighting, killing, displaying our strength. We want to make the other party compromise first. In fact, it's clear that you can't destroy Emperor Dong's palace, and Li Huaqing won't let you leave Zhongzhou State. That's the bottom line for all of us. With this bottom line, it's impossible for us to fight to the death. So, in the end, no matter how bad it is, even if the Flourishing Age Fund is greatly weakened, even if the academics have lost their foundation, we still have to talk. Li Huaqing definitely has a trump card when he goes to Xianyuan City. Right now, the rumors in the outside world are that Li Huaqing has prepared a trump card that can make you compromise 100% of the time. No matter what happens, as long as he shows his trump card, you will retreat. No one knows what that trump card is. Li Huaqing has never told anyone about it. Maybe apart from Li Huaqing, only you, the person involved, know something. Put yourself in his shoes and think about what Li Huaqing would give you to make you compromise without hesitation. Li Tianlan was silent. He thought of Qin Weibai immediately. He thought of Li Huaqing threatening him with Qin Weibai. Everyone had a weakness. Qin Weibai was his biggest weakness, a weakness that could make him put aside everything and ignore the overall situation. An incomparably, piercingly cold, murderous intent suddenly rose in his heart. Li Huaqing wanted to threaten him with Qin Weibai. How dare he? What are you thinking about? Bai Qingqian suddenly asked. Although the two of them were thousands of miles apart in video communication, she saw all the changes in Li Tianlan's expression in an instant. She wanted Li Tianlan to think about what could make him interested. But the expression he showed was not interest, but killing intent. Could it be Little Bai? Li Tianlan suddenly said. Threatening you with Little Bai? Bai Qingqian was stunned. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched slightly. What if it's true? Bai Qingqian asked meaningfully. If Little Bai falls into the hands of the academics, will you compromise? Do you think I will? Li Tianlan suddenly laughed. In everyone's impression, except for Qin Weibai, Li Tianlan had always been a person with little mood swings. He was not exactly dull, but most of the time, he was calm and restrained in his emotions. At least, Bai Qingxian had never seen Li Tianlan smiling at this moment. This was the kind of Li Tianlan that made people's scalp tingle at first sight. Bai Qingxian was silent. If they dare to kidnap little Bai, it will be difficult for her to appear by my side in this life. The academic faction wouldn't dare to release her. Even if I compromised, they wouldn't dare to release her. They would only control her even more strictly. They would use her innocence, her life, and her reputation to threaten me. They would push their luck and make me the academic faction's dog. Everyone related to me will be the academic's dog. And even if I become a dog, in the end, little Bai can't even come back. Li Tianlan laughed. So, under such circumstances, I will not compromise. His voice spread along the sword energy all over Emperor Dong's palace and fell into the ears of Bai Qingxian and Li Huacheng in the villa 1,000 meters away. I will only take revenge. I will bring little Bai back by force, dead or alive. His voice suddenly became incomparably cold and hard, yet incomparably calm. 3 days. It will only take 3 days for me to travel all over Zhongzhou State. Apart from a minister and Old Zhou, there are more than 20 counselors. Other than Old Wu and Old Bai, there are more than 200 governors, hundreds of deputy governors, hundreds of generals, and the heads of the wealthy clans. Ha! Ha! I can guarantee that within 3 days, these people, their families, friends, friends of friends, and anyone who is even remotely related to them will not be able to survive. I can give up Emperor Dong's palace and the Flourishing Age Fund. All these can be destroyed, and indeed can't stop the destructive power of Zhongzhou State. But they can't stop me. If this happens, I will let the whole Zhongzhou State die with little Bai. The sword energy above Emperor Dong's palace roared like a dragon. Li Tianlan nodded to Bai Qingxian and whispered, "I'll go and have a look." The communication was still maintained. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared instantly. When he appeared, Li Tianlan had already appeared outside the gate of Emperor Dong's palace thousands of meters away. The sword energy within 10,000 meters began to sweep the whole city as Li Tianlan moved. Li Tianlan's figure flickered, and the next second, he had come directly to the edge of Xianyuan City. The surging sword energy directly set off a gust of wind in Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan left Xianyuan City and entered Ningbian. His figure flashed unscrupulously with the expansion of the sword energy, covering thousands of meters with one step. The entire Tianan Freedom Corps stationed at the border of Ningbian could feel the terrifying sword energy that covered the sky and covered the earth. Li Tianlan swept through the center of Ningbian City and directly entered Nanyun of Zhongzhou State. Qin Weibai was already on her way back. Her private plane took off from Reki City and would land at Nanyun International Airport, which was a temporary route that belonged to Qin Weibai. Everything was normal on the plane. Li Tianlan spoke to Qin Weibai on the phone before talking to Bai Qingxian. The plane's safe landing was inevitable. Even if the academics wanted to kidnap Qin Weibai, they couldn't shoot down the private plane. What they wanted was Qin Weibai alive, who could be used to threaten Li Tianlan. So if they wanted to take action, there was no chance before the plane took off. The only chance was when Qin Weibai got off the plane and took the helicopter to Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan would personally stay at Nanyun International Airport and bring Qin Weibai back. The sky above Emperor Dong's palace was empty. In the villa, Li Huacheng sat quietly on the sofa. Li Tianlan's voice seemed to still echo in his ears, clear, cold, and calm. Li Huacheng couldn't help imagining that scene. If all the people Li Tianlan mentioned were dead, what would it mean for Zhongzhou State? In that case, the Southeast Group, the Academics, the Prince Group, the North Group, and the Special Warfare Group would all cease to exist. The only one left was the Giant Group. But the Giant Group obviously couldn't afford such a responsibility. Zhongzhou State collapsed in an instant. All kinds of systems were completely paralyzed, and the national power plummeted. It was surpassed by Star State, the European Alliance, and East Island. If such a situation really happened, there was no doubt that Li Tianlan would be the biggest sinner since the founding of Zhongzhou State. He would be notorious for thousands of years. But who cared about that? He could even give up Emperor Dong's palace. What else couldn't he do? Li Huacheng could completely feel Li Tianlan's bone-chilling madness. It was the desperation under extreme calmness, the determination to destroy the whole world. Li Huacheng shook his head slightly and smiled. This was indeed a so-called solution. Kidnapping Qin Weibai. But he wasn't stupid. How could he be so stupid? Li Tianlan had been wrong from the beginning. Li Huacheng did have a trump card, and he could guarantee that he could make Li Tianlan completely compromise the moment he took out that trump card. Li Tianlan couldn't think of what this trump card was. Maybe he couldn't think of it, but he didn't dare to think about it or believe it. The whole Zhongzhou state didn't dare to think about his real trump card. But such a trump card was a benefit, a gift, absolutely not a threat. Li Huacheng picked up the teacup and drank some water. His whole body was completely relaxed and leaned against the sofa. He didn't take Li Tianlan's warning to heart at all. He breathed a sigh of relief and muttered to himself, "What a mess." Chapter 12:30. When the silver private plane, which reflected the airport lights, slowly stopped at Nanyang Airport, Li Tianlan's figure also appeared in the airport. With his current status, if he said a few words, he could make all the order in the airport stop. Planes could not take off, passengers who landed were not allowed to get off, the CEO would personally accompany him, the most professional ground crew would put on a grand welcome ceremony, and all sorts of other messy things would not be a problem. However, Li Tianlan did not alarm anyone. The moment he arrived, the sword energy had covered the entire airport. When the door of the private plane opened and the gangway fell, Li Tianlan appeared under the gangway. The first to come out were 4 female soldiers of the Snowdance Corps, who had escorted Qin Weibai back from Reki City. There were not many of them, but the lineup of 1 at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and 3 in the fire-flaming realm could not be regarded as insignificant. The first time the 4 came out, they saw Li Tianlan standing outside. They looked a little excited and even a little fanatical, but then they forcibly suppressed it and bowed slightly to Li Tianlan. The Snowdance Corps. From the day they were transferred from the Thunderbolt Battalion to the Snowdance Corps, they knew that they belonged to Li Tianlan. In the chaos of Snow Country, Li Tianlan and the Snowdance Corps soared to the sky at the same time and completely established their positions. After the chaos of Snow Country ended, although the Snowdance Corps still stayed in Reki City, Li Tianlan had never given up this power. He had not been to the European continent after that, but through the power of Dongsheng Wudi, he had been giving the Snowdance Corps the greatest care. After the establishment of Emperor Dong's palace, the Flourishing Age Fund was merged into Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianning, Fireman, and others joined the Snowdance Corps. These were all manifestations of Li Tianlan's influence in the Snowdance Corps. After the Flourishing Age Fund joined Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan personally signed the first large-scale fund transfer, which is as high as 30 billion Zhongzhou dollars, and it was used on the Snowdance Corps. This money would build a new training ground, new dormitories, improve their living standards, and new meals for the Snowdance Corps. Emperor Dong's palace also had a second plan to allocate funds to the Snowdance Corps. It was said that it would use the channels of the Dark Knights to upgrade their armaments in all aspects from the European Alliance and make up for some of their current shortcomings in armaments. Li Tianlan's shadow really existed in the Snowdance Corps. Even if Li Tianlan had not appeared in front of them for more than 2 years, a series of actions clearly showed that they were people of Emperor Dong's palace. The Snowdance Corps was also a super corps of Emperor Dong's palace. They were sacrificing their lives for the strongest expert of this era. Now that they suddenly saw Li Tianlan standing outside the plane, their excitement could be imagined. Li Tianlan nodded to them. The next second, his eyes involuntarily fell on Qin Weibai, who walked out of the cabin. Tight jeans, thin white sweater, exquisite high heels. Dressed simply, Qin Weibai had an indescribable purity and beauty. There was a touch of surprise and joy on her perfect and dreamy face. Obviously, she did not expect Li Tianlan to come here. Her high heels stepped lightly on the carpet on the gangway, and she quickened her pace to Li Tianlan's side. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth moved, and he smiled. Qin Weibai stood in front of him and tilted her head slightly. She smiled softly and said, "You miss me so much? It's only 40 minutes from here to Emperor Dong's palace. Can't wait?" Li Tianlan's smile grew bigger and bigger. Qin Weibai seemed to realize that her words were inappropriate. She blushed slightly and punched Li Tianlan lightly. "Don't be serious. I'm a serious person. I'm not as horny as you think." Li Tianlan held Qin Weibai's hand casually and said with a smile, "I understand." Qin Weibai squinted and smiled with hidden meaning. "I've long heard that the woman in East Island is carrying a bag and living with you. How can my majesty be horny? I'm afraid you've long been immersed in someone else's tenderness. Your majesty, I can't thank you enough for remembering to pick me up. Where did you learn to be so sarcastic?" Li Tianlan felt a headache coming on. It's my nature." Qin Weibai clenched her small fist and raised it. "Tell me honestly, did you make any mistakes?" "Of course not." Li Tianlan laughed and pulled Qin Weibai into his arms. He lowered his head and gently bit her delicate ear. "I've eaten delicacies. How can I still eat porridge and side dishes? My appetite has been spoiled by you." Qin Weibai's body was a little weak. Her ear could definitely be regarded as her weakness. Every time Li Tianlan gently bit her ear, this goddess, who was high and mighty in the eyes of outsiders, would become like a well-behaved cat. "Haven't you ever thought of changing your taste occasionally?" Qin Weibai's big eyes were a little blurred, and she muttered to herself, "You're delicacies, but you're also porridge and side dishes. You can satisfy all my tastes." Li Tianlan touched Qin Weibai's soft long hair. "You're glib." Qin Weibai glared at Li Tianlan, then smiled, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him on the face. "For the sake of your honesty, I'll give you a reward." Li Tianlan smiled and looked at the 4 female soldiers of the Snow Dance Corps, who also walked down the gangway, but hesitated and didn't know whether they should come over or not. He waved to them. The 4 female soldiers were stunned. They looked at each other, and then their faces turned red. They trotted over and gave Li Tianlan a standard Zhongzhou state military salute. "Your Majesty." The voices of the 4 rose and fell at the same time, in unison. "You've worked hard." Li Tianlan smiled. "How is everyone in Reki City?" "Your Majesty, the Corps is very good. Reki City is very cooperative with us, and the Corps commander also takes good care of us." Among the 4 female soldiers, the middle-aged woman who was the leader said softly. Her appearance was not beautiful, and her figure was not exaggerated. However, she was dressed in the special military uniform of the Snow Dance Corps. She stood straight and had her own temperament that could not be ignored. Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. The female soldier waited quietly for a few seconds. Seeing that Li Tianlan did not continue, she whispered, "Your Majesty, if there's nothing else, we'll go back. We were going to escort Madam to Emperor Dong's palace, but your Majesty has come in person." She smiled softly and did not continue. "Company Commander Red Lotus, you should also go back to Emperor Dong's palace. You go first. I'll walk around with Little Bai." Li Tianlan said with a calm smile. The woman named Red Lotus was obviously stunned for a moment. She did not hear Li Tianlan's words clearly, but she heard the first few words. Her voice was a little trembling. "Your Majesty, do you remember my name? You're famous. How dare I forget?" Li Tianlan's voice became a little happy. The predecessor of the Snow Dance Corps was the Thunderbolt Battalion. What did the Thunderbolt Battalion mean? Powerful, crazy, invincible, and invincible. There was no need to use too many adjectives. It was a simple sentence. The Thunderbolt Battalion was the strongest army in the world. There were very few women in such an iron army. In other words, the women who could successfully enter the Thunderbolt Battalion through layers of selection were not ordinary, and they were even more resilient than men. There were less than 100 women in the Snow Dance Corps, and they formed a company of their own. Red Lotus, an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, was the company commander and also served as the senior staff officer of the Snow Dance Corps. She was 42 years old and a colonel. It could be said that she was a strong person who could not be ignored in the Snow Dance Corps. Well, Reki City is generally calm, and the Aurora Legion will not make any big moves in a short time. The Snowdance Corps and Emperor Dawn's Palace are a family. In the near future, I will consider sending some people to Emperor Dawn's Palace. Little Bai is also short of people. Company Commander Red Lotus can be Little Bai's close guard. The three of you can join the Nightmare Corps. Li Tianlan paused and continued. Of course, this is not a mandatory order. If you don't want to come, you can continue to go back to the Snowdance Corps. Red Lotus looked back at her three subordinates. The three of them were trembling with excitement, and their faces were red. But because of their iron discipline, they did not speak. Red Lotus laughed heartily and said with a heroic spirit, "Of course we want to. Reki City is still too boring. If we can come to Emperor Dawn's Palace, we can't ask for more." She looked at Qin Weibai and bowed slightly. "Madam, please take care of me in the future." From a colonel to a bodyguard, it seemed that she had plummeted, but in fact she had soared to the sky. To be a bodyguard, it depended on whose bodyguard she was. If she could become Qin Weibai's close guard, not to mention anything else, just in terms of her personal future, Red Lotus's future could be said to be broad. At least one thing was certain. With this identity, the person who she had to salute when she met before now had to lower his head and talk to her when he saw her. Qin Weibai smiled and squeezed Red Lotus's shoulder. She did not say much. In front of Li Tianlan, she had never shown any sharpness. "Well, you take the helicopter back to Emperor Dawn's Palace. We'll talk after you settle down." Li Tianlan waved his hand and watched the female soldiers leave with a calm expression. These were all people he could completely trust. "Aren't we going back with them?" Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan with some confusion. "What bad idea do you have?" "You said it's a bad idea, so it can't be much better," Li Tianlan said casually. Qin Weibai snorted softly. "By the way, where's Xianyan?" Li Tianlan suddenly asked. She got on the plane in Reki City and went to Huoding to find military counselor. "I hope she can learn more from military counselor during this time," Qin Weibai said softly. Li Tianlan said yes and did not say anything more. "Anyway, we're not in a hurry to go back now. Let's go shopping." Qin Weibai took Li Tianlan's arm excitedly. "It seems that you haven't gone shopping with me yet. I want to buy a few pairs of shoes and a few sets of clothes." "Well," and Li Tianlan looked around and said helplessly, "This is the airport. There are also large shopping malls in the airport. Pig, what era are we in? Let's go. Help me choose a few pairs of shoes and put them on the plane. It's convenient to change." Qin Weibai giggled and pulled Li Tianlan out. Li Tianlan subconsciously looked back at the silver private plane parked in place. The private plane belonged to the Samsara Palace, so it was now the property of Emperor Dawn's Palace. Qin Weibai had been flying around the world in it over the years. Qin Weibai specially changed a cloakroom inside the plane, in which there were about 100 pairs of shoes, bags, and clothes of different styles. The total value was probably enough to buy a luxury apartment in the center of Yuzhou. Qin Weibai once said that she would find a chance to play with Li Tianlan on the plane and let him experience the temptation of a uniform. Unfortunately, there had been no chance. This was something that Li Tianlan had always felt a little regretful about. "Then let's go shopping." Li Tianlan laughed. "By the way, I'll fish and see if anyone is stupid enough to take the bait." Chapter 12:31. Fishing. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan in confusion. "What do you mean?" "It's a sensitive period. I want to see if anyone is stupid enough to attack you." "If there is such a person," Li Tianlan's eyes flashed. He was already by Qin Weibai's side, so it was impossible for anything to happen to her. But if someone really wanted to attack Qin Weibai, whether they succeeded or not, Li Tianlan would make them pay an absolutely terrible price. "Well, I thought you really came to pick me up because you missed me. It turns out that you plan to use me as a bait? Am I bait?" Qin Weibai reached out and pulled Li Tianlan's face, pulling his calm face into a slightly weird expression. "If it weren't for this, would you still be waiting for me to come to you in Emperor Dong's palace? I'm worried about your safety." Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai with soft eyes. Because his face was pulled by those small hands, his voice was a little distorted. Qin Weibai gently wrinkled her nose. She didn't realize how cute this little gesture was. In Li Tianlan's heart, It was cute enough to make the whole Zhongzhou state fall. He was often fascinated by some of her inadvertent little gestures. Don't worry, Qin Weibai smiled sweetly. At times like this, no one dares to attack me, including the academics. Li Tianlan slightly raised his eyebrows. The academics do have a trump card. To be exact, Li Huaqing has a trump card. But his trump card can't be to kidnap me. How could Li Huaqing be so stupid as to be able to stay in this position? If he had to choose this method to completely irritate you, he wouldn't be in Emperor Dong's palace now. Qin Weibai whispered with a smile. In fact, there was one more thing she didn't say. She knew Li Huaqing's trump card, so she never really worried about the academics. The academics were now fighting tit for tat with Emperor Dong's palace. Both sides were in chaos, and the loss of the Flourishing Age Fund was even more shocking. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter, because as long as Li Huaqing's trump card was revealed, Emperor Dong's palace would indeed compromise. At that time, everything they lost would be made up 10 times, 100 times, or even thousands of times. That trump card was interests, the future, the dynasty, not a threat. In fact, the most likely to attack him now was not the academics, but other people who wanted to take advantage of the chaos. They were in the best position to make a move. But Qin Weibai knew very well that they had a standpoint, but they had no candidate. Jiang Shangyu was seriously injured, Li Guangtu was captured, and Lin Fengding was one of them. Li Tianlan was her man. Apart from these four, there were no other candidates. It was true that Qin Weibai did not know martial arts, but it did not mean that she did not have the ability to protect herself. Now, she slept very well. In the deepest sleep, she could dream of the boundless starry sky every night. Everything became reality in her imagination. She was still looking for the tree in her dream, the faint, transparent Li Tianlan who seemed to disappear at any time under the tree. In her dream, she imagined hundreds of trillions of interstellar fleets searching nonstop. In the real world, her progress in the spiritual domain was extremely fast. Now Qin Weibai was very close to the transcendent realm in the spiritual field. What did this mean? When the spiritual domain reached this level, it could easily hypnotize an invincible realm expert and have a strong impact on an expert at the peak of the invincible realm. In this state, if Qin Weibai went further, she would have reached the point where she could try to crown Li Tianlan's spirit. Now, even in the face of an expert at the peak of the invincible realm, she had enough ability to protect herself. For the time being, she could not easily affect an expert who surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. An expert who could surpass the peak of the invincible realm, but how many such experts were there in the dark world? At this time, they would either be seriously injured or not hurt her. So Qin Weibai flew around unscrupulously. Jiang Shangyu obviously understood this. So even if he had the right to make a move, he did not have the ability. At the same time, he would restrain his allies from seeking their own deaths. So now Qin Weibai was very safe. Very, very safe. Do you know Li Huaqing's trump card? Li Tianlan put his arms around Qin Weibai's slender waist, and their figures flashed. The next second, they had arrived at the gate of the airport shopping center. The shopping center of Nanyuan International Airport was a large shopping mall. All kinds of first-line international brands had counters here. Qin Weibai walked in with Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "I can roughly guess. Li Huaqing is a gentle person, but he is very courageous. This kind of person can usually control the overall situation and be stable. But in his bones, he also has a very crazy passion and the courage to take a big gamble. Although our relationship is not harmonious now, I still have to say that he is very optimistic about you and values you very much. Of course, this is not just his personal feelings for you. He does this just for Zhongzhou State. He protects Gu Xingyun and Li Guangtu. In the future, he will even support Jiang Shangyu. If possible, he will also extend an olive branch to the Wang family of Beihai. But all this is not for them or for himself, but to set up an opponent for you. He hopes that you can mature quickly, that you can understand what the overall situation is, and that you can understand the necessity of concession and compromise. Only in this way can he gamble with you. Gamble on what? Li Tianlan was a little curious. I can't say. Qin Weibai blinked her eyes and walked into a counter. Li Tianlan didn't recognize the brand and didn't pay attention to it. The two young shopping guides were full of enthusiasm. They had seen a lot of pot-bellied and young and beautiful couples, and they had also seen a lot of proud and indifferent strong women who were alone. However, it was indeed rare to see a young man and woman who were naturally close to each other, and a girl like Qin Weibai was even more rare. I can't say it now. Qin Weibai sat and tried on a pair of high heels. Her white and delicate feet were exquisite and beautiful, shining like jade in the light. When they were the most intimate, Li Tianlan liked to play with and bite this pair of peerless shoes. Li Tianlan looked at them and felt a little thirsty, and he was also in a trance. Different from Qin Weibai's shyness and Dongsheng Rushi's eccentricity, there used to be a girl with a pair of exquisite little feet who would give him everything he liked with a smile and let him enjoy them wantonly. But in the end, she still disappeared from his life. He hadn't seen her for almost 3 years. He sat on the sofa and was lost in thought. Qin Weibai's voice continued. I'm just guessing now. What if I'm wrong and you laugh at me? I want to see him when I go back. He's an old fox who thinks he's the winner now. I want to know if he can still be so arrogant if I expose his trump card. She stretched out a small foot in a brand new silver high heel. There were silver shining spots on the high heel, which made the small foot look more white and attractive. Do I look good? Yes. Li Tianlan quickly came to his senses and said with a smile. Qin Weibai glanced at him and looked a little suspicious, but she didn't say anything. She just chuckled and said, Wrap it up. Then, she picked up another pair. Li Tianlan sat on the side and watched quietly. The natural fragrance from Qin Weibai drifted over and filled the exquisite counter, as if it was nourishing his soul. High heels, jeans, a long skirt, a suit, and a subtle fragrance floated in the air. Qin Weibai's voice and smile were soft and light, but they were beautiful. She obviously didn't have the concept of saving. As long as Li Tianlan thought it looked good, she would wrap it all up. This was the airport shopping center. After buying them, there would naturally be someone to send them to the private plane, so Li Tianlan didn't have to carry the bags. Qin Weibai was dressed in different styles. A woman's desire to shop was something that even a goddess could not avoid. Upstairs and downstairs, Li Tianlan accompanied Qin Weibai for a casual stroll. In his hand was a bank card with an astronomical balance. Li Tianlan hardly used it on normal days. He only knew that the money in it was basically inexhaustible. As he casually swiped the card and looked at the clear and elegant smile of his sweetheart beside him, Li Tianlan felt like a rich man. It was a feeling he had never experienced before. For him, who had almost endless physical strength, shopping naturally did not feel tired. On the contrary, he felt that the experience was very good. Li Tianlan began to miss Qin Weibai's cloakroom on the private plane immensely. There were all kinds of clothes and shoes in there, as well as a comfortable and soft bed. It was a pity that he rarely took the private plane with Qin Weibai. Occasionally, there were other people beside them. It seemed that he could only enjoy it when he had the chance to take Qin Weibai out alone. Li Tianlan gently raised the corner of his mouth. Qin Weibai, who was choosing silk stockings, looked at his smile and said softly, What bad idea are you thinking? 1,000 miles in a day, Li Tianlan laughed. Qin Weibai's face was slightly red. Obviously, she thought of some promises she had made with Li Tianlan. She rolled her eyes at him and whispered, Dirty. Carrying on the family line is a matter of course. Li Tianlan laughed. I'm still waiting for you to give birth to a son for me. Before I went to East Island, you said that if I came back alive, I would be rewarded and that you would give birth to a child for me. After so many years, well, Li Tianlan's somewhat joking expression paused slightly, and he was a little confused. Did you take any safety measures? Li Tianlan was sure that he wasn't so bored. No. Qin Weibai blushed and looked at the silk stockings in front of her. She didn't wear silk stockings often, but she used them a lot when she was with Li Tianlan. These things were basically one-time consumables in Li Tianlan's hands. They were white, black, and flesh-colored. Qin Weibai planned to pack them all back. That's strange, Li Tianlan murmured. Don't worry. Qin Weibai smiled. You're very healthy, and so am I. Of course, she knew why she hadn't been pregnant. It might be incredible, but in fact, if she were pregnant, the master of Samsara Palace would definitely be pregnant at the same time. This kind of thing went beyond physiological factors. No matter how you looked at it, although they could exist at the same time, they were indeed one person. Now the master of Samsara Palace was hovering on the edge of life and death. Naturally, Qin Weibai had no possibility of giving Li Tianlan a child. Yes, Li Tianlan nodded and said thoughtfully, "It seems that I need to work harder." Qin Weibai giggled. "Then you have to perform well tonight." Li Tianlan hugged her from behind, lowered his head, and bit her ear. He said in a hoarse voice, "Let's go back together later. We don't need a helicopter. How about we try outside tonight?" "Outside? To get a room?" Qin Weibai asked. Li Tianlan laughed in a low voice. "When I came here, I saw a forest was not bad." Qin Weibai finally understood what he meant outside. She blushed and said, "Tianlan, you're getting worse." Li Tianlan's hand tightened around her, and he smiled without saying a word. The shopping guide walked over quickly with a smile on her face, and her eyes were respectful. Before she got close, Qin Weibai gently broke away from Li Tianlan's arms and whispered with a red face, "Find a place." Chapter 1232. If Li Huaqing lived in Emperor Dong's palace, without seeing Li Tianlan was a game. Then Qin Weibai returning to Emperor Dong's palace to visit Li Huaqing was a necessary courtesy. Li Huaqing attached great importance to this visit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were facing a formidable enemy. No one would underestimate Qin Weibai. If Li Tianlan's invincibility was only in terms of individual strength, then Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai were practically invincible in all aspects. At least in Li Huaqing's mind, Li Tianlan was not mature enough. The whole world knows this. Li Tianlan himself did not deny it. He had formed a new group, but it was difficult for him to completely control it. Therefore, he asked for Bai Qin Xian from the giant group. Wu Zhengmin, who had reached the retirement age and should be enjoying his old age, was also placed in the council. Military counselor, who wanted to retire, now served as the chief administrative officer of Emperor Dong's palace. Situ Tsengyue, who was aloof from worldly affairs, became the deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace. Xiao Mahai, who was slick and slick, became the grand supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace. These were all necessary actions. Li Tianlan, who was infinitely close to the peak in terms of personal force, still needed time to grow. He needed to see through the situation in front of him and understand when and what he should do, how to control the overall situation, how to keep the internal balance, and how to better shoulder his responsibilities and sprint forward. And before he truly matured, he needed these elders to help him up the horse and send him on his journey. Bai Qin Xian, Wu Zhengmin, military counselor, Situ Tsangya, Xiao Mahai, etc. These are the seniors that Li Tianlan needed. He needed their experience and wisdom. But Qin Weibai was different. Li Tianlan might not be mature enough to control the situation, but Qin Weibai was more than capable of doing these things. There are too many things to prove this. Qin Weibai was clear-headed and rational enough. She was open-minded, calm, and active in her actions. She had a great vision. In the past hundreds of years in Zhongzhou State, there were countless extraordinary women, but no one could be as elegant and dazzling as she was. Such a person was enough for Li Huaqing to ignore her age and identity. Qin Weibai was qualified to talk to him. Although it was just a visit in name, Li Huaqing could clearly feel that she was not friendly. He asked Ma Si to clean the room, made tea himself, and waited quietly. As expected, Li Tianlan did not come. Han Xinyan, Li Tianlan's secretary, came with Qin Weibai. Han Xinyan, who was dressed in a white suit, still looked quiet and elegant. She followed Qin Weibai's every step. Ma Si, whose forehead was still wrapped in gauze, stopped Han Xinyan with a smile and said softly, "I'm sorry, Secretary Han. The president wants to talk to Her Highness alone." He pointed to a coffee table in another direction. "If Secretary Han feels bored, we can go over there and have some tea while we wait." Han Xinyan frowned slightly and glanced at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai nodded. Han Xinyan nodded, turned around, and walked over. Ma Si instinctively wanted to follow, but Qin Weibai smiled and said, "Mommy, what's wrong with your head?" Ma Si was stunned. He subconsciously touched the wound on his head and increased the strength of his hand. It hurt so much that he trembled slightly. He smiled bitterly and said, "It's okay. I accidentally fell down. It's a little embarrassing." "On the helicopter? Is it related to Tianlan?" Qin Weibai asked with a smile. As soon as Li Huacheng arrived at Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan gave him a show of strength. That night, sword energy surged over Emperor Dong's palace, and a helicopter was directly pulled into Emperor Dong's palace by Li Tianlan. The wreckage of the helicopter was scattered everywhere. Li Huacheng was not injured because of the safety belt, but Ma Si was a little tragic. He was bleeding from his head and had a concussion. He returned to Li Huacheng yesterday. "It's not His Majesty's fault. I was really careless." Ma Si hesitated and said softly, "His Majesty is angry. I can completely understand it, and so can the President. If my injury can eliminate His Majesty's resentment, it's a good thing. I'm willing to do it. Your Highness may not know, but I can be sure that the President values His Majesty very much." Qin Weibai took a deep look at him and said softly, "Mommy is really a smart man." Ma Si shook his head with a wry smile and did not speak. He was Li Huacheng's secretary, which meant too many things. Besides, he was Li Huacheng's old secretary. He had been with Li Huacheng since he first became a council member and was not the president. It had been 15 years now. It was extremely rare that he did not change his secretary for such a long time. It was enough to see that Li Huacheng used Ma Si very well. At least in Li Huacheng's heart, Ma Si was definitely one of the most trustworthy people. He was his confidant. Li Huacheng knew Ma Si very well. Ma Si naturally knew Li Huacheng well enough. Now the outside world, and even the entire academics, were guessing what Li Huacheng's trump card was when facing Emperor Dong's palace. There were all kinds of guesses, but no one was really sure. Qin Weibai could vaguely guess something based on the story of the master of Samsara Palace and the current situation, but she was not sure. And Ma Si also had a guess, which was based on her understanding of Li Huacheng. Although that guess was a little unbelievable, combined with Li Huacheng, who was now calmly watching the confrontation of Zhongzhou's state with a smile, this guess seemed to be the only explanation. Qin Weibai was a smart woman, and even smart could not be used to describe her. She was a very intelligent woman. Therefore, whether it was to ease the relationship between Li Huacheng and Li Tianlan for the academics or for his own future, he had to say these words. These words seemed to be nothing, but the hint was enough. Combined with the hint of Ma Si's words, Qin Weibai collected another clue. The seemingly absurd guess in his heart could basically be confirmed. Her eyes became more and more peaceful, and she said softly and slowly, "Tianlan's temper is not very good. Sometimes when he is angry, he even scolds me. But he is a person who is angry, but he doesn't bear grudges. His temper comes and goes quickly. When this thing is over, when he thinks of you, Mommy, Tianlan will definitely feel embarrassed. Mommy, with this wound of yours today, Tianlan will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation later." Ma Si's eyes suddenly lit up for a moment, and he was ecstatic. Qin Weibai understood his hint and gave a good response. "I know His Majesty's temper." Ma Si chuckled and touched the wound on her head again. "As long as Your Majesty can calm down, no matter how serious the injury is, I will be fine. It's worth it to me." He looked at Qin Weibai and couldn't help but make a joke. "Her Highness is an outstanding beauty. His Majesty is actually willing to scold Her Highness. It's really unexpected." Qin Weibai chuckled. Her eyes flickered. She did not speak, but the temperature of her face was gradually rising. Of course, Li Tianlan scolded her not when he was angry, but when they were at their most intimate. Li Tianlan had never regarded her as a goddess in bed. That bad guy liked to humiliate her, call her those embarrassing names, and liked her begging him to call her master. Qin Weibai did not resent all this. No matter what, she was still a woman. She was high and mighty outside. It would be too tiring for her to be respected by her husband as a goddess at home. So, even though Li Tianlan's demands were a little overbearing and even a little obscene, Qin Weibai was still willing to cooperate and please him despite her shyness. She could truly feel that she was his woman. The feeling of being used, possessed, and conquered made her feel extremely at ease. Qin Weibai shook her head. Masi also seemed to feel that her joke was a little inappropriate. She smiled awkwardly, pointed to Han Xinyan on the other side, and said respectfully, "Your Highness, I'll go over first." "Okay." Qin Weibai nodded and looked at Li Huacheng in front of her, who had his back to her. She took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She slowly walked over and sat down on the sofa opposite him. Li Huacheng looked up at her, smiled, and personally poured a cup of tea for her. "The top Maojian tea tastes good. Tianlan is in a bad mood and doesn't want to talk to me. But although it's a little cold here these days, the hospitality is quite good. Even I don't often drink this kind of tea." The tea fragrance spread slightly with the infusion of the tea, and the taste was clear and moist. Maojian tea was produced in Zhongyuan province. There had always been a saying in Zhongzhou State that the top Maojian tea and the top Longjing tea were not often drunk even by the directors. The former had mostly become the private collection of the Dongqing clan, while the latter was the treasure of the Wang family of Beihai. But now, with the return of Jiangzhe to the Li family, the top Longjing tea of Beihai was probably less and less. Qin Weibai reached out her hand and played with the delicate teacup with her white fingers. She said softly, "Tianlan has more than just emotions. Are you still dissatisfied? You even want to kill me?" Li Huacheng smiled and said, "Did he leave Emperor Dong's palace last night to pick you up? I heard what he said before he left. Young man, your murderous intent is still too strong. In fact, in many cases, killing may not necessarily solve all problems, and killing is not the only way to solve problems. We are all young. Young people should have the mentality and fighting desire of young people." Qin Weibai laughed softly and said, "Now in Emperor Dong's palace, there are already people who have the strength to support Tianlan's youthful frivolity." Li Huacheng frowned, and his eyes were obscure. "That's what worries me the most." Qin Weibai said, in confusion, but her eyes were extremely calm. "Emperor Dong's palace is too powerful and involves too many people. Tianlan controls Emperor Dong's palace. He has the strength, but his mind is not mature enough. It's not a bad thing." Li Huacheng sighed and said, "Tianlan is indeed strong. I also believe that he is really invincible in the world now. But no matter how invincible he is, there is a limit. Now, it is obviously impossible for him to defeat the whole world alone. He once said that he is the overall situation of Zhongzhou State, and I can agree with this sentence. But so what? He is strong in Zhongzhou State, but what about internationally? Does he have to be strong all the time? Offend Star State? Offend the European Alliance? And all countries? The game between countries has always existed. If you are too strong, you will be easily broken. If you don't know how to give in, for Zhongzhou State, such invincibility will not bring prosperity, but chaos and disaster." Qin Weibai's eyes sparkled. At this moment, she was completely sure of Li Huacheng's trump card. "So," Qin Weibai's voice was very soft, "now you need to establish a strong enough enemy for Tianlan, or even more than one. Such an enemy needs to be strong enough and difficult enough to deal with. Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun are both in Zhongzhou State. From the standpoint of Zhongzhou State, Tianlan, and they are on the same side, which is the most difficult thing to deal with. At least, Tianlan can't directly kill them like he does to enemies. Li Kuangtu is more difficult to deal with. If Zhongzhou State lets him come back, his identity will be the same as Gu Xingyun's. Similarly, because of Li Kuangtu's identity and the purgatory of Heaven Capital behind him, it will be more difficult for Tianlan to deal with him. So Tianlan will think that you are deliberately making things difficult for him, targeting him, and making things difficult for him." Li Huacheng narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "I am making things difficult for him. Young people are too arrogant. Of course, we old guys don't like him. If that's the case, then you won't be in Emperor Dong's palace." Qin Weibai also laughed. "This is not making things difficult. From my point of view, this is a test, right?" Li Huacheng's smile froze. "You gave Tianlan a test a difficult problem. Gu Xingyun, Jiang Shangyu, and Li Quantu are all the stumbling blocks you put on Tianlan's path, but at the same time, they are also the ladder you built for Tianlan to climb to the sky. Killing can't solve all problems, so you've confined his enemies to an environment where they can't be killed, at least they can't run over blatantly. If Tianlan wants to kill them, he needs more flexible means and methods. He will fight, suppress the enemy, set up traps, calculate, retreat, compromise, or endure when the opportunity arises. He will understand the situation in front of him better and understand what he should do. These are all things you think he should learn. Qin Weibai said softly, you want him to grow up quickly, to grow into a real invincible realm warrior, and also to grow into a mature person. A leader of great talent and bold vision. Her soft voice paused, and then she smiled like a flower. Because only in this way can you trust him with the whole Zhongzhou state and even the future of the academics. Am I right? Chapter 1233. Crack. With a slight sound, crack suddenly appeared on the teacup in Li Huaqing's hand. The crack spread along the celadon teacup from top to bottom. The whole teacup was full of cracks. The tea was swaying in the teacup, creating ripples one after another. Li Huaqing looked down at the teacup in his hand and said nothing. Qin Weibai's smile froze. Her pupils contracted, and she stared at the teacup full of cracks. The depths of her eyes were full of unconcealable shock. The celadon teacup was not strong. When it was full of tea, there were many people who could crush the teacup. Any expert in the fire-flaming realm could do that. But in absolute shock, the teacup was accidentally cracked in the shock. But the tea did not spill at all. It was not difficult to achieve this kind of power. But what kind of person could have such a precise grasp of power? Qin Weibai stared at Li Huaqing in a daze. For the first time, there was a touch of full vigilance in her eyes. Li Huaqing, the president of Zhongzhou State, did not understand martial arts. The whole world knew that. Li Huaqing lowered his head and kept holding the teacup, which looked a little weird. Because he lowered his head, Qin Weibai could not see his eyes. Because another secret was exposed, because the trump card in his heart was revealed. This was the first time Li Huaqing had experienced this feeling. Perhaps only Qin Weibai could do this. Sharp, direct, precise, abrupt. Just when he thought that Qin Weibai was testing him, and just when he thought that Qin Weibai might make some demands, this woman, whom Li Huaqing had never underestimated, directly revealed his trump card. Give Zhongzhou State to Li Tianlan. That was his plan. It sounded inconceivable, absurd, and fantastical. But as long as he did it, no one dared to say that there was no chance of success. Zhongzhou State did not have a president from the Dark World. But Snow Country once had a leader who was a secret agent. His existence was not for nothing. During his term, Snow Country might not have changed much. But because of his existence, Snow Country, which had been on the edge of the cliff at that time, was pushed back to a stable position. Because of this, there was the situation of Snow Country today. Similarly, Li Huaqing could also hand over the future of Zhongzhou State to Li Tianlan. This kind of handover was not a symbolic handover. Instead, he truly handed over Zhongzhou State to Li Tianlan without reservation. What does this mean? In other words, Li Huaqing would be re-elected in this election. 5 years later, it was still hard to say who would be in Li Huaqing's position. It was unlikely that it would be Li Huaqing. It could be Wang Qinglei, Wen Siyuan, or someone else. The possibility of the academics, the new group, and the giant group was not high. It could even be said to be very small. The president after Li Huaqing was most likely from the Southeast group or the Prince group. 10 years after the new president took office, which was 15 years from now, Zhou Yuanshan, who was about to take control of Nanyue province, was already unstoppable. Zhou Yuanshan was also the focus of the new group and the giant group. 15 years later in Zhongzhou State, Dongqing Wudi by Qin Xian, by Qin Xiao, and the others must have retired. At that time, Zhou Yuanshan would be incomparably powerful. As long as he maintained the current momentum, there would be almost no obstacle for him to ascend to the position of president. With the return and stability of Tiannan, Ning Qiansheng as the first mayor of Xianyuan City, would inevitably become Zhou Yuanshan's right-hand man. Zhou Yuanshan, Ning Qiansheng. At present, these were the two leaders of the new group that could be confirmed to be 15 years later. At that time, the new group would be more powerful than it was now. It would be full of talents, masters, and wealth. But would that be the peak of the new group? Perhaps many people thought so before. Even now, everyone thought so. But at the moment when Li Huaqing's trump card was revealed, Qin Weibai knew it was not. 15 years later, it was far from the peak of the new group. Their peak would be 25 years later. That was 10 years after Zhou Yuanshan. At that time, Li Tianlan would be nearly 50 years old. He would become the leader of the new group, the palace master of Emperor Dong's palace, the war god protector of Zhongzhou State, and the president of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan, the president. What kind of crazy trump card was this? What kind of firm trust was this? Was it absurd? Not at all. As long as this trump card was revealed, all the contradictions and conflicts between Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan would disappear in an instant. Li Tianlan would hand over Li Guangtu and accept Li Huaqing's arrangement. At the same time, the academics would become the most trustworthy and firm ally of the new group. They would support the new group to maintain stability in the next 10 years, to achieve glory in 15 years, and to reach the peak in 25 years. Betrayal? No one was a fool. Perhaps the time span of this plan was very long. But Emperor Dong's palace was confident. Li Tianlan was also confident. Even if time passed, the academics would follow Li Huaqing's will. It was not only because of Li Huaqing's strong influence, but also because of Emperor Dong's palace. Emperor Dong's palace could be said to be the strongest superpower in the dark world. What would happen to Emperor Dong's palace 25 years later? Betrayal? Was the academic stupid? What was the point of betraying for the sake of betrayal? How did you know? Li Huaqing lowered his head, holding the tea, and asked in a calm voice. I guessed. Qin Weibai's expression gradually relaxed. She smiled impeccably again and said, The president's move is very clever. Now, perhaps no one could have imagined that behind the tit-for-tat confrontation between the academics and the new group was Li Huaqing's full kindness, appreciation, and sincerity. This was definitely a stroke of genius beyond everyone's expectations. The premise was Li Huaqing's trust in Li Tianlan, and it was only this trust. Li Huaqing was thinking for Zhongzhou State and the academics. From the president's point of view, Li Huaqing was very qualified, even quite excellent, in the past 10 years. But from the position of the leader of the group, Li Huaqing inevitably failed. At least in the 10 years he stayed in this position, the academics did not rise, nor was it as strong as expected. They had not even perfected their promotion system until now. Now, although Li Huaqing still had 5 years, time was too tight in these 5 years. And it was foreseeable that as the 5 years gradually approached, 5 years later, when Li Huaqing stepped down from the stage, the academics would face the joint pressure of the major groups, constantly squeezing their living space, which was also in line with the principle of balance. But Li Huaqing obviously did not want the academics to become a local group. So he put his chips on Li Tianlan. His promise to Li Tianlan was very heavy. If Li Tianlan wanted to get Zhongzhou State, he needed the support of Li Huaqing and the academics. To become the president, Li Tianlan had not even thought of this crazy idea, but Li Huaqing thought about it. Li Tianlan could not refuse. As long as he accepted, at least before and during his time in office, he must ensure that the academics was in the sequence of the top groups in Zhongzhou State. And the people he supported must be the people Li Huaqing supported. In this way, Li Huaqing's influence would last forever. Emperor Dong's palace would become stronger and stronger, and the academics would become more and more stable. Under such mutual influence, various chains were tantamount to completely locking the relationship between the new group and the academics in the future, and there could be no more variables. And this so-called future could be expected to be 35 years in the future. In 35 years, both Li Tianlan and Li Huaqing could get what they wanted. This was a real win-win situation. Do you think it's ridiculous? Li Huaqing continued to ask. If I think it's ridiculous, I won't guess the answer. Qin Weibai said indifferently. Li Huaqing smiled and whispered, "At present, I'm not sure whether this decision is right or wrong." Qin Weibai understood the meaning of this sentence. Li Huaqing would give Zhongzhou's state to Li Tianlan, but he gave Zhongzhou's state to Li Tianlan, who was nearly 50 years old at that time. Not Li Tianlan, who was in his 20s now. Now, giving Zhongzhou's state to him was equivalent to letting Zhongzhou's state commit suicide. He needed Li Tianlan to become mature and profound in all aspects, and invulnerable. These 25 years were the time for Li Huaqing to cultivate Li Tianlan. He would make enemies for him, one after another, in all aspects, and constantly make up for his shortcomings. Time will prove everything, Qin Weibai said lightly. So you're saying yes? Li Huaqing raised his head. His eyes were gentle and bright. I can't give you an answer, Qin Weibai whispered. This is Tianlan's business. He should make the decision, and only he can make the decision. Good, you know what to do and what not to do. There was a touch of appreciation in Li Huaqing's eyes. I'm looking forward to Tianlan, but I'm relieved that you're in Zhongzhou's state. You flatter me. Qin Weibai's expression was soft. She lowered her head and looked at Li Huaqing's hand holding the teacup. I thought the issue between Liao Dong and the Flourishing Age Fund would continue to be in a deadlock, but you leak my secret. It seems that I have to take the initiative to talk to that guy. Li Huaqing laughed self-deprecatingly. You've already shown your strength. Qin Weibai looked at his hand and said meaningfully, the academics have also shown their strength. Li Huaqing thought, and his hand holding the teacup slowly moved away. Qin Weibai knew that the confrontation that shook Zhongzhou's state was over from this moment on. Next would be a chaotic battle. The Celadon teacup stood quietly on the tea table. Cracks covered the teacup, with a kind of balanced perfection. The tea was still in the cup, without a trace of leakage. Qin Weibai reached out and gently tapped the teacup. Silently, the teacup turned into a piece of debris. The tea in the teacup was like a phantom, quietly disappearing the moment the teacup was shattered. Qin Weibai was silent for a long time before she slowly said, "What's your realm?" "No realm." Li Huaqing smiled gently. "In a sense, I'm the same as you." After a pause, he whispered, "I'm the same as Li Kuang too." "I know, you're different from him," Li Huaqing said quietly, "but I'm the same as you." Chapter 1234. After Qin Weibai left, Wang Xiaoyao locked himself in the study for nearly a day. No one knew what he was doing in the study and what he was thinking. He took out the documents and put them back. During this period, the high-level officials of the Aurora Legion knocked on the door several times, but there was no response. One day later, Wang Xiaoyao walked out of the study without drinking a drop of water and was directly blocked by several high-level officials of the Aurora Legion in the small corridor outside the study. The harsh and chaotic quarrel stopped the moment the door of the study was opened. An extremely burly middle-aged man was stunned at first, and then said in an excited tone, "Your Highness, you must slow down." Wang Xiaoyao frowned. "Don't spit on my face." The burly man took a deep breath and seemed to adjust his emotions. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and looked at the high-level officials of the Legion outside the corridor. The burly man, codenamed Mad Lion, came from the Wang family of Beihai. In the eyes of Mount Dibbing, he was a traitor like Wang Xiaoyao. He was an expert of the half-step invincible realm and one of the 2 deputy commanders of the Aurora Legion. Next to the burly and huge body of Mad Lion stood a somewhat thin and gloomy middle-aged man. Compared with Mad Lion, who had anger and excitement written all over his face, he was obviously much calmer. When he saw Wang Xiaoyao come out, he just smiled and did not speak. This was Wang Xiaoyao's confidant, whom he had cultivated in private when he was in the Wang family of Beihai. At present, he was also Wang Xiaoyao's most capable subordinate, codenamed Shadow. He was a top expert of the half-step invincible realm and was only half a step away from the combat capability of the invincible realm. In the entire Aurora Legion, except for Wang Xiaoyao, Shadow was the #1 expert. On weekdays, when Wang Xiaoyao's will remain silent in the Aurora Legion, Shadow's orders were the highest orders of the Legion. For him to appear here, it was obvious that something had happened that even he could not make the decision for. Wang Xiaoyao was a little surprised. His eyes fell on the third person. The third person was the oldest, in his 50s, and his face was more weathered. It was he who had argued with Mad Lion just now. At this time, there was still a little anger on his face. He was Eagle-Eye, at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and also the minister in charge of the intelligence department in the Legion. Come in and talk. Wang Xiaoyao thought for a while and returned to the study. The 3 high-level members of the Aurora Legion followed Wang Xiaoyao in. Wang Xiaoyao picked up the cup, poured himself a glass of water from the water dispenser, and drank it in one gulp. He walked back to the desk and sat down. He said calmly, "Tell me, what kind of shadow?" "You tell me." Mad Lion wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he sat down unwillingly. The shadow still kept smiling, but his eyes were a little dignified. "Your Highness, the Tusk battle group was raided by the Snowdance Corps yesterday and suffered heavy losses. Less than 2/3 of the people withdrew. The other side obviously knew the situation of the Tusk battle group in advance, and their actions were very accurate. The commander and 3 deputy commanders of the Tusk Legion have all died in battle, and the middle level has also suffered heavy losses. At present, our forces in Pasfu State have almost been uprooted. The Snowdance Corps has gone too far. The Mad Lion intends to take his division to fight back directly, but Minister Wang disagrees." "What's the reason for not agreeing?" Wang Xiaoyao frowned. Pasfu State was close to Wulan State. It was the territory that the Aurora Legion had just conquered, and it was at the key point of establishing the Dark Order. Wang Xiaoyao was also very concerned about it. The Aurora Legion claimed to have occupied the dark world of Snow Country, but it was just a claim. In fact, Pasfu State was the front line of the confrontation between the Aurora Legion and the Snowdance Corps. There was a border state between Pasfu State and Wulan State, but in the recent tug-of-war, the Snowdance Corps had gained the upper hand. Now they suddenly raided Pasfu State and succeeded, which not only meant that the Aurora Legion had lost control of Pasfu State, but also meant that the power of the Aurora Legion in the border state would be swallowed by the Snowdance Corps. This loss could be said to be the heaviest since the conflict between the Aurora Legion and the Snowdance Corps. Wang Xiaoyao silently lit a cigarette and looked at Wang Zhe, who was in charge of intelligence in the Aurora Legion. "Your Highness, I have received accurate information that the 5,000 elites of the Snowdance Corps to support the Dark Knights have returned," Wang Zhe said in a calm voice. In terms of blood relations, he was Wang Xiaoyao's cousin. It was just that the branch of the Wang family that belonged to him had long fallen into desolation. If Wang Xiaoyao had not given him a hand many years ago, he might have already been sleeping on the streets. Therefore, he cherished his position in the Aurora Legion very much and was loyal to Wang Xiaoyao. "All of them are back?" Wang Xiaoyao's pupils shrank slightly. According to the current intelligence statistics, about 3,000 people have returned, but the follow-up people will come back in batches. Wang Zhe said in a deep voice, "The Dark Knights openly claim to be a close ally of the Emperor Dong's palace. With the announcement of the Divine List, it is meaningless for the 5,000 people to be stationed in the headquarters of the Dark Knights. As long as the Emperor Dong's palace does not deny that the Dark Knights are their allies, no one will dare to touch the Dark Knights and touch the bottom line of the Emperor Dong's palace during this period. The Emperor Dong's palace is flourishing. Li Tianlan has climbed to the top of the Divine List. Now, they need a powerful target to demonstrate their strength. No one wants to be the first to jump out. The Mad Lion intends to lead people to fight back against the Snowdance Corps. What's the difference between doing this at this time and courting death? If we lose, we will suffer heavy losses. If we win, we will run into the muzzle of Li Tianlan's gun. The Aurora Legion is now a very suitable target to establish our prestige." Wang Xiaoyao was thoughtful. The Snowdance Corps took the opportunity to expand. This may not be Li Tianlan's intention. After a full 5 minutes of silence, Wang Xiaoyao said softly. His expression was a little complicated. "It may also be her intention. As soon as she left, the Snowdance Corps took action. Is she trying to disturb my thoughts and make me panic?" In the study, the 3 high-level officials of the army did not speak. Wang Xiaoyao tapped his fingers on the table and fell silent again. "Your Highness." After a long time, The Mad Lion scratched his head and said in a muffled voice, "Do we fight?" "Of course we have to fight," Wang Xiaoyao said subconsciously. The shadow's expression froze. Wang Zhe opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Wang Xiaoyao continued, "But we still have to give in. There's no need to provoke Li Tianlan now. The time is not right. Let's observe the situation in Zhongzhou State first." "So Wang Zhe said cautiously, "fight and retreat at the same time." "Save our strength." Wang Xiaoyao nodded and said yes. "Fight and retreat at the same time? How far do we have to retreat? They've been fighting all the way from there. It won't take long for them to control the Dawn Islands." The Mad Lion looked dissatisfied. "Retreat until Snow Country can't stand it anymore." Wang Xiaoyao smiled and said, "When a Snowdance Corps expands to a certain extent, Snow Country will not sit back and watch. They will take action. That will be our chance to recover the lost land. Now, if we can give in, let's give in first." Wang Xiaoyao stood up and said, "The shadow is fully responsible for this matter." The shadow nodded subconsciously and said, "Okay, Your Highness, you." Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and said blandly, "I'm going to Zhongzhou State. When I'm not there, the core will be handed over to you." Chapter 1235. The helicopter gradually moved away from the Dawn Islands under the night sky. It flew higher and faster. Wang Xiaoyao sat quietly in the cabin, squinting at the gradually blurring lights of the Dawn Islands. His eyes flickered, and he tried to keep himself in the calmest state while thinking about the situation in Zhongzhou State. Whether it was the reasons he had spoken of or the thoughts he had not spoken of, there was one thing that could not be denied. The situation in Zhongzhou State was more important than the development of the Aurora Legion in Snow Country. It was much more important. The analysis of the Aurora Legion's intelligence department made sense. With the announcement of a new ranking on the divine list in the Dark World, Li Tianlan was like the sun at high noon. In this situation, anyone or any force that got in Li Tianlan's way could not have a good ending. Li Tianlan now needed a powerful target to establish his power. The Aurora Legion naturally had the right to do so. The elites of the Snowdance Corps stationed in the Dark Nights returned, and the Snowdance Corps began to expand. This could be said to be a trap deliberately left by Emperor Dong's palace. From another perspective, Li Tianlan was now waiting for others to attack the defenseless Dark Knights, or for the Aurora Corps to fight back because of the expansion of the Snowdance Corps. There will be more of these traps. East Island, South America, and Zhongzhou State could all become traps. It all depended on who couldn't help but jump in first. The current Emperor Dong's palace ignored everything. No matter who made a move, under Li Tianlan's sword chi, they would only end up smashed to pieces. Naturally, Wang Xiaoyao did not want to be the target of Li Tianlan's prestige. Moreover, his mind was now focused on Zhongzhou State. Although the retreat of the Aurora Legion would cause him to lose something, he knew very well what was most important. Furthermore, retreating did not mean that they had no fighting spirit. He was not from Emperor Dong's palace. Jiang Shangyu, Li Kuang-tu, Gu Xingyun, the Wang family of Beihai, and other superpowers in the Dark World were not allies of Emperor Dong's palace. This meant only one thing to them. That was Li Tianlan couldn't deal with him at present. However, he had to be targeted. The current Emperor Dong's palace was enough to frighten anyone because of their wealth, intelligence, military force, and potential. No one dared to go against Emperor Dong's palace, but everyone was eager to do so. To put it simply, none of them wanted to face Li Tianlan alone. The Dark World was waiting for an opportunity. It was an opportunity to unite many forces to target Li Tianlan and attack Emperor Dong's palace. Such an opportunity must appear in a relatively stable situation. To be exact, before the election of Zhongzhou State ended, the situation in Zhongzhou State would be difficult to stabilize, which meant that Jiang Shangyu, Li Kuang-tu, and Gu Xingyun would also be difficult to stabilize. Therefore, in the past 6 months, there might be undercurrents in the Dark World, but there wouldn't be too big of a disturbance. The expansion of the Snowdance Corps would not have an impact on the foundation of the Aurora Legion. When the Aurora Legion retreated in defeat, the subsequent intervention of Snow Country was inevitable. Wang Xiaoyao now took a step back in exchange for more energy to pay attention to the situation in Zhongzhou State. He was paying attention to Zhongzhou State. Wang Xingxiao was also paying attention to Zhongzhou State. Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun were also paying attention to Zhongzhou State. Li Kuangtu also got the attention of the parliament. In this era, people who might pose a threat to Li Tianlan were paying close attention to Zhongzhou State. There would be no big waves in the dark world. Wang Xiaoyao was thinking about the losses caused to the Aurora Legion by his retreat and the expansion of the Snowdance Corps. After thinking about it over and over again, he could be sure that such a loss might be great, but it was absolutely acceptable. Therefore, in the roar of the helicopter's rotor, he once again turned his attention back to Zhongzhou State and Wuyue. The position of the Minister of Supervision of Wuyue could be said to be one of the issues that he and the Southeast Group paid the most attention to at present. The Southeast Group paid attention to Wang Qinglei of Wuyue. Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei paid attention to Wuyue itself. This was the biggest reliance for them to gain a foothold in Zhongzhou State in the future, and they could not afford to lose it. Ji Wenjiang had gone to Wuyue before. If the new Minister of Supervision of Wuyue stood on the opposite side of Wang Qinglei, it might be another storm comparable to that of Liaodong. Wang Xiaoyao thought about it, took out his mobile phone, and dialed a number. The phone rang twice and was quickly connected. A somewhat low male voice sounded. Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao hummed and said straightforwardly, Xiaoa, what's the latest news about the Ministry of Supervision? On the other end of the phone was Zhang Xiaohua, the current Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Supervision. He used to be the Minister of Supervision of Huading and was transferred to Yuzhou 5 years ago. Now he ranked third among the Deputy Ministers of the Ministry of Supervision, second only to Ji Wenjiang and the Deputy Minister of the Prince Group. He had a high position and was also Wang Xiaoyao's strongest force in the Ministry of Supervision. Zhang Xiaohua and Yu Chunguang were close friends. For Wang Xiaoyao, he completely trusted Yu Chunguang, and naturally, he could also fully trust Zhang Xiaohua. Do you want to ask about Wuyue? Zhang Xiaohua's voice was a little tired. Now the situation in the ministry is quite chaotic, and the matter of Wuyue has not been discussed for the time being. The case in Liaodong is very serious, and the ministry is almost in a mess. Wang Xiaoyao's expression was slightly relaxed. The answer to the case in Liaodong had already involved the deputy speaker. It was inevitable that the Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State would intervene. After Ji Wenjiang returned to Yuzhou, the first supervisory group had been sent to Liaodong to accept Zhao Yu's case. This was just the beginning, and there would be many subsequent actions. Bai Qingqian acted decisively, and the academy would naturally not sit still. Their current power in the Ministry of Supervision was estimated to have begun to cooperate with the Prince Group to put pressure on Ji Wenjiang. This would definitely involve most of Ji Wenjiang's energy, so that he would always focus his attention on Liaodong. That is to say, the matter of Wuyue can be delayed? Wang Xiaoyao laughed. But it won't be long. Zhang Xiaohua said softly, the minister is indeed under pressure, but to put it bluntly, there is not much that can be discussed. In the end, he will still make up his mind. Once he makes up his mind, the next thing to deal with must be the matter of Wuyue. Mu Guofeng must be dealt with, but it's hard to say who will replace him now. During this period, it will be about 10 days at most. We have to hurry up. What do you think about the candidate to replace Mu Guofeng? My idea is to hear your thoughts. Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile, unhurriedly. Ji Wenjiang's intention to transfer Mu Guofeng away was very obvious, so the new Minister of Supervision could not be raised within Wuyue. It was definitely a parachute appointment. Wang Xiaoyao had a wide network, but he could not trust many people. If he was parachuted, Wang Qinglei's influence on Wuyue was also limited. Zhang Xiaohua's opinion was very important to him, and he had been in the supervision system for many years. He had seniority and prestige, so he was qualified to propose a candidate. He should first form his own voice in the Ministry of Supervision, so that Wang Xiaoyao could operate in the outside world through some old people of the Southeast Group. I have a candidate, and even more than one, but the one with the greatest chance can only be Chu Jianchao. Zhang Xiaohua said in a deep voice, you should be familiar with him. Of course not, Wang Xiaoyao said with a broad smile. He is also the best candidate in my mind. The most important thing for us now is to protect Wu Yue. As for the rest, we could take a step back, right? It's best that you think so. Zhang Xiaohua breathed a sigh of relief. If Chu Jianchao goes to Wu Yue, the opposition should be very small. The minister will probably agree. Chu Jianchao, one of the 11 directors of Huading, was the minister of supervision. He was also one of the people who took over Zhang Xiaohua's position in Huading after he left. He was his absolute confidant. Letting Chu Jianchao go to Wu Yue could undoubtedly stabilize the current situation in Wu Yue. This was not what Ji Wenjiang wanted to see. But this gave the Southeast Group another opportunity from another perspective, an opportunity that the Southeast Group would seize even if they knew what Wang Xiaoyao was thinking. This was an open conspiracy. For Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao, Wu Yue was a place they would protect even if they died. In the current situation for the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai, Wu Yue was not necessarily a place they would fight for even if they died. The premise was that Wang Xiaoyao could give them enough benefits. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, I am already on my way to Zhongzhou State. When I arrive in Yuzhou, I will visit Senior Xie as soon as possible. Chapter 1236. After returning to the luxurious bedroom on the top floor of Emperor Dong's palace from Li Huaqing's residence, Li Tianlan was waiting for Qin Weibai to have breakfast. The dishes on the table were obviously two extremes, extremely light and extremely greasy. Qin Weibai smiled and looked at Li Tianlan, who was sitting in a daze. She sat next to him and served him a bowl of rice. She said softly, What are you thinking about? Uncle Ing just called me. The Snowdance Corps had a conflict with the Aurora Legion not long ago. It was not a small one. They took over a state called something. Li Tianlan frowned. Past state. Qin Weibai smiled and said, I arranged it. Past state has a good profit. Not just arms, right? Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai with burning eyes. Past state of Snow Country was quite famous in the Dark World. It was rich in armaments, from light weapons to heavy weapons. Before the Aurora Legion, it was a very important profit point for the Polar Ground Alliance. Every year, countless kinds of weapons would flow from Past State to several countries in the eastern part of the European continent. Then, with Wulan State as the core, the weapons would radiate to the Dark Knights, the major clubs in the European continent, the Mafia, and many other underground forces. This interest chain was extremely mature. The Aurora Legion could take over it. Now that the Snowdance Corps occupied Past State, they could naturally take over it after negotiating with the military factories in Past State. The arms trade alone could bring tens of billions of profits to Emperor Dong's palace every year. Moreover, although Snow Country's economy was relatively backward, its conventional weapons were no less sophisticated than those of any superpower in the world. Occupying Past State meant that the Snowdance Corps would also relieve a considerable part of the pressure on armaments. On the plus side, it was tantamount to sharing the worries of Zhongzhou State. Of course, from another perspective, it was also further getting rid of the Snowdance Corps' dependence on Zhongzhou State. The cake of Past State is very tempting. Of course, we can't give it up. Qin Weibai picked up a vegetable for Li Tianlan with chopsticks. Seeing him eat it helplessly, she nodded with satisfaction. The 5,000 elites we lent to the Dark Knights don't need to stay there anymore. After the new ranking on the Divine List, no one will dare to touch the Dark Knights in a short time. You force Xingu to stay in Emperor Dong's palace. You won't do nothing, will you? Well, she should be about to enter the peak of the invincible realm. When she went back, the Dark Knights would naturally be safer. So I transferred them to the headquarters of the Snowdance Corps to cooperate with the expansion of the Snowdance Corps. This is for profit and also to test the waters. Probe? Li Tianlan asked vaguely. He ate very quickly and did not have high requirements for food. The greasier, the better, and the more energy it provided, the better. He did not care about taste or appearance, as long as it was edible. He casually handed the empty bowl in his hand to Qin Weibai. His eyes flickered as he said, Is Wang Xiaoyao worth your time? Worth it. Qin Weibai nodded. But it's not worth it. His relationship with the Wang family of Beihai is what I'm most interested in at present. Why do you think Wang Xiaoyao didn't betray Mount Dibbing? Li Tianlan asked. Intuition. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and said with some uncertainty, I always feel that this matter is a little strange, but I can't put my finger on it. If Wang Xiaoyao's betrayal is fake, it means that the two brothers, Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao, are acting. Tianlan, do you know what this means? Li Tianlan ate quietly. I haven't paid attention to Wang Xiaoyao. He had to pay attention to many things, including his martial arts, the development of Emperor Dong's palace, and Li Huaqing's attitude. Jiang Shangyu, Li Kuangtu, and even Gu Xingyan were more worthy of his attention than Wang Xiaoyao. And what he couldn't pay attention to, Li Tianlan believed that Qin Weibai would see for him. Whether Wang Xiaoyao betrayed or not is crucial to the future of the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai said softly, whether Wang Xiaoyao is on Wang Qinglei's side or Wang Tianzong's is completely different. Li Tianlan paused and asked, if Wang Xiaoyao didn't betray, is it impossible that Wang Qinglei didn't betray? That's impossible. Qin Weibai shook her head. Wang Qinglei is destined to betray Mount Dibbing. His position can be confirmed. The reason why I suspect Wang Xiaoyao is because of Yu Chunguang. Yu Chunguang was the former mayor of Huading and the current governor of Wuyue. Li Tianlan thought about it and couldn't think of anything. He lowered his head and continued to eat. I've studied Yu Chunguang's resume. In the past 20 years, he and Wang Xiaoyao really advanced and retreated together. Maybe because of this, his promotion was extremely fast. Even the most critical step was the Southeast Group's exceptional promotion of him. Before he became the deputy speaker of Huading, he was just the speaker of a city in Beihai. It's only been 2 years since he was transferred to Huading. Qin Weibai thought silently. Well, it should be shortly after I met Wang Xiaoyao and met Wang Tianzong for the first time. It is said that the two brothers had a quarrel, and then Yu Chunguang was promoted to the mayor of Wuyue. It was also that year that Wang Qinglei entered the parliament and became the speaker of Wuyue. Is there any relationship between them? Li Tianlan asked. It seems that there is no relationship, but promoting Yu Chunguang always makes me feel that he is blocking the position in advance. After he was transferred from Huading to Wuyue, this feeling became more obvious. Qin Weibai shook her head. Li Tianlan was deep in thought as he ate. Wang Qinglei has to improve this year, no matter what. This is a very important matter to him. No matter what happens, as long as he can become a director, he can accept it. Qin Weibai continued. So, you said that if I meet Li Huaqing, I can mention that Wang Qinglei should stay in Wuyue as a director. Li Tianlan said thoughtfully. That's right. Wang Qinglei can continue to stay in Wuyue, but he can become a director. This is an acceptable result for him. If Wang Xiaoyao really works together with Wang Qinglei, then he can accept this result as long as Wang Qinglei becomes a director. Qin Weibai's voice was gentle. Li Tianlan instantly understood. If Wang Xiaoyao didn't betray Mount Dibbing, then he would fully support Wang Qinglei to become a director. But he hoped that Wang Qinglei would leave Wuyue and become a director. In this way, Yu Chunguang would naturally enter the parliament and become the chairman of Wuyue. It doesn't seem to be a big deal. It's just a win-win situation between Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao. But in fact, once Wang Qinglei leaves Wuyue, his life and death are in the hands of Wang Xiaoyao. Qin Weibai laughed. In the current situation, the Southeast Group will definitely lose Wuyue, its core base, in this election. Ji Wenzhang went to Wuyue, and the supervisory minister of Wuyue will be replaced. But even if the new supervisory minister can stir up a storm, it is unlikely that Wuyue will return to the arms of the Southeast Group, because it means that he has to overthrow Wang Qinglei and Yu Chunguang at the same time, which is almost impossible. So, let's see who the new supervisory minister of Wuyue is. Maybe we can find some clues. Who could it be? Li Tianlan was in high spirits. What I hope is that the people of the Prince Group enter Wuyue, which means that Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei have completely betrayed each other. What I don't want most is that the people of Huading enter Wuyue, especially the current supervisory minister of Huading. This also means that Wang Xiaoyao is very likely to be acting with Wang Tianzong. Of course, it's just a possibility. It can't prove anything. The situation is still confusing. But if it's really possible, then we can at least be sure of the biggest strategic goal of the Southeast Group after Siyuan in this election. It's Huiting. Li Tianlan's voice drifted. They have lost Wu Yue, so they must want a back garden that is no less important than Wu Yue. Huiting is the most suitable place. They will transfer the power that belongs to Wang Xiaoyao to Wu Yue. With the current speaker Zhong Yue of Wu Yue stepping down, they will have the qualification to trade with the Prince Group. They will trade Wu Yue to the Prince Group on the condition that the other party helps them take down Huiting. So Wang Xiaoyao's attitude is crucial, and so is Wang Qinglei's departure. Qin Weibai said softly, once the new supervisory minister of Wu Yue is the one in Huiting, it means that Wang Xiaoyao and Yu Chunguang's control over Wu Yue will be further enhanced. If Wang Xiaoyao doesn't betray Mount Dibbing, it means that although Wu Yue is out of the control of the Southeast Group, it is only superficial. Wang Tianzong still needs time to recuperate. When he recovers and returns, Wang Xiaoyao and Yu Chunguang will stab Wang Qinglei in the back. All the forces of Wang Qinglei's faction will be destroyed. At that time, Wang Qinglei will be unable to recover, and Wu Yue, because of Yu Chunguang's absolute control, will return to the hands of the Southeast Group. In this way, the Southeast Group will not only eliminate the biggest internal hidden danger, but also seize Huiting. At that time, the Wang family of Beihai will control the three key places of Beihai, Huiting, and Wu Yue. There is no doubt that it will become the first group in Zhongzhou State and reproduce the peak period when the Li family was still there more than 20 years ago. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan quietly. At that time, Tianlan, even if you can go further and make another breakthrough, it will be difficult for us to surpass the Wang family of Beihai. Chapter 1237. When the plane landed at Yuzhou International Airport, it was already 9 o'clock in the evening. Wang Xiaoyao walked out of the airport alone and saw Zhang Xiaohua standing at the pickup gate with a serious face. Zhang Xiaohua was thin, not tall, and plain-looking. At first glance, he looked inconspicuous, but he had a strong aura, cold, serious, and meticulous. A considerable number of people in Zhongzhou State respected and feared him. In the past few years in the Ministry of Supervision, several governor-level big shots had been defeated by him. As the Southeast Group and Wang Qinglei gradually drifted apart, Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei were closely related. Zhang Xiaohua's existence had been widely regarded as the sharpest sword in Wang Xiaoyao's hand. I haven't been to Yuzhou for a long time. Wang Xiaoyao handed the luggage to Zhang Xiaohua and said with a smile, compared with the Dawn Islands, it's as warm as spring here. I'm not used to it. Zhang Xiaohua took the luggage and subconsciously lifted it. The luggage was very light. He frowned slightly and asked, don't you plan to stay in Yuzhou for a long time? I'll leave after I finish my business. Wang Xiaoyao said, the situation in Snow Country is also very tense. The Snow Dance Corps has begun to expand. Zhang Xiaohua was silent for a while. The Snow Dance Corps, in a sense, it had become a thorn in the heart of the whole parliament, and it was a thorn that could not be pulled out for the time being. In the past, the Snow Dance Corps was quietly stationed in Reki City and did not make any big moves, so the parliament tacitly turned a blind eye to it. But with the expansion of the Snow Dance Corps, this thorn in the parliament's heart would only get deeper and deeper, and eventually, it would be dripping with blood. Li Tianlan, Zhang Xiaohua said bluntly, I can't stop him. Li Tianlan is not in Snow Country. I only have to face the Snow Dance Corps. At this stage, I really can't stop him, but I don't have to. It's just a few more steps back. But even so, if I can go back as soon as possible, I'd better go back as soon as possible. I'll do what I should do in Zhongzhou State. I can't interfere in the things that I can't do, and I can't do anything even if I stay here. It'll only add to my troubles. Zhang Xiaohua was silent. In the upcoming election, Wang Xiaoyao could not do much, but it was not little either. If he could finish what he had to do, there was not much meaning in staying here. Instead, returning to Snow Country could make the parliament more concerned. The two of them entered the parking lot and boarded an ordinary black Passat. Zhang Xiaohua did not bring along her secretary or chauffeur. She personally drove and asked, "How long do you intend to stay? Let's see how it goes. It's best to settle it within a week." Wang Xiaoyao whispered, "I'm sure I'll be scolded when I meet the elders. But no one can tell if I can solve the problem, and whether they will contribute or how much effort." Li Huacheng is now in Xinyuan City. I think Hua Zhengyang will meet me on his behalf. Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyan probably had something to say to me. When Zhang Tai was at school in Yuzhou province, his junior sister apprentices had already made great achievements in their careers. One of them had a husband who was a famous professor in a certain field. I should visit him when he's not at home. Who knows, there might be some unexpected gains. Zhang Xiaohua glanced at Wang Xiaoyao through the rearview mirror with a strange look in her eyes. "What?" Wang Xiaoyao smiled. "Playing with women. I haven't heard of this topic for a long time." Zhang Xiaohua smiled, which was rare. She said she missed me. Why didn't she? And some information in her husband's hands is of great use to me. I can get it through her. Why should I refuse? Wang Xiaoyao's voice was a little bleak. I didn't think about this before because I thought I still had hope. Now he smiled and asked, "What else do I have?" Zhang Xiaohua thought of the wife of the palace master of East Palace, who was now peerless in Tianan. He shook his head and changed the topic. "Shall we go directly to Xie's hometown?" "Yes, I contacted him before we got on the plane. Now he's waiting for us to drink." Wang Xiaoyao nodded. Mr. Xie's full name was Xie Kuan. He was a council member of Zhongzhou State and the Minister of Supervision 20 years ago. Now he was 80 years old and could be said to be one of the few remaining veterans of the Southeast Group. The old man rarely made his voice heard, but he had great influence in the Southeast Group. His disciples were all over Zhongzhou State. Today's council member of Zhongzhou State and the Minister of Supervision, Ji Wanzhong, was promoted by Mr. Xie many times. Mr. Xie could be said to be his mentor. The situation in Wuyue was treacherous. The position of the Minister of Supervision affected everyone's sensitive nerves. If Wang Xiaoyao wanted to intervene in this matter, visiting Mr. Xie was the most direct and effective way. And the means. Will Mr. Xie agree? Zhang Xiaohua whispered. Mr. Xie liked Wang Xiaoyao very much. Before he left Mount Dibbing, no matter how busy Wang Xiaoyao was, he would come to Yuzhou to drink with Mr. Xie in every festival. When he was in the Long family of Beihai, he was a sensitive figure who coordinated the relationship between Mount Dibbing and the Southeast Group. He naturally attached great importance to these old people. Mr. Xie also attached great importance to Wang Xiaoyao, but he was somewhat lukewarm to Wang Tianzong. But to put it bluntly, it was just his personal preference. Wang Xiaoyao was now a traitor of Mount Dibbing and a traitor who had separated Wuyue in the eyes of the Southeast Group. It was impossible for a tycoon like Mr. Xie to do anything based on his personal preference. No matter how much he liked Wang Xiaoyao, he would first consider problems from the standpoint of the Southeast Group. It was not possible for him to influence his decision with his personal feelings. "How do you know if you don't try?" Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. "In fact, it depends on the situation. My personal friendship with Mr. Xie can only guarantee that I can still go to his house to drink now. If there is nothing else, it is almost impossible for me to intervene in Wuyue's affairs. But if I have enough chips in my hand, I can still fight for some things with my personal friendship with Mr. Xie." "Chips? What chips?" Zhang Xiaohua was a little confused. The leaders of the Southeast Group should now realize the fact that they have invested a lot of resources in Qinglei before, and the time when Qinglei and I left the Southeast Group is also very sensitive. It is difficult for them to react in just a few years. In addition, the Southeast Group has been in turmoil in the past 2 years. Even if they want to intervene in Wuyue, they are powerless. At this point, the result is obvious. In this election, no matter what, it is impossible for them to control Wuyue. Ji Wenzhong went to Wuyue just because he was unwilling to give up and wanted to struggle. In fact, even if they succeeded, so what? Wuyue would not fall into their hands. This time I met Mr. Xie to explain this fact. I will take Wuyue, but I will leave them something else. To put it bluntly, this is a deal. Chapter 1238. The inconspicuous Passat slowly entered Longhu Park. It followed the smooth and winding mountain road and stopped in front of Longhu Park's 21st building. The area surrounding the single-family villa had been transformed into a small courtyard. The area of the lawn had been reduced and turned into a few small vegetable fields. There were withered grape trellises next to the vegetable fields. Neatly trimmed potted plants were placed at the front door. Soft lights shone down from the courtyard. The night in front of Building 21 was leisurely. Wang Xiaoyao got out of the car, carrying the pork knuckle and soy sauce that he had just bought on the way as a side dish. Zhang Xiaohua, who came with him, opened Wang Xiaoyao's luggage and took out the gift that Wang Xiaoyao had prepared for Elder Xie. It was a square sandalwood box, square and heavy. In Wang Xiaoyao's luggage, this was probably the only thing of weight. The two of them walked to the gate of the villa one after another. A middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes greeted them. He shook hands with them and said welcome with a warm smile, but with a hint of reluctance that could not be concealed. Wang Xiaoyao did not mind and said with a smile, "Brother Xie, are you staying at home recently?" "No. Something came up, so I wanted to chat with the old man." Xie Dong shook his head. He was Xie Kuan's eldest son and was now the director of a bureau in the Ministry of Personnel of Zhengzhou State. 2 years ago, he was promoted to the rank of deputy governor. It was not very eye-catching in a deep-water government like the Ministry of Personnel, but it was a real power. In this year's general election, Xie Dong was very likely to become the deputy minister. His ranking might be low, but he could also protect the interests of the Southeast Group. Xie Dong's ability and status in the Southeast Group fully proved that he could get this position. The Southeast Group had been developing for hundreds of years, and it was impossible for every talented person to be a traitor. Wang Qinglei was the biggest mistake of the Southeast Group in the past 20 years, but more people like Xie Dong, who was trusted and did not betray this trust, were the backbone of the group. If he could become the deputy minister of the Ministry of Personnel this year, he would be one of the most influential representatives of the Southeast Group in the Ministry of Personnel, and his future could be said to be bright. At this time, a traitor like Wang Xiaoyao came to his house. Not to mention whether it would affect the views of the Southeast Group's big shots on him, Xie Dong would not welcome them. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao's appearance here might be to do his father's work. "Elder Xie, do you want to see me?" Wang Xiaoyao asked with a smile. Of course, the old man was in a good mood and personally made a few dishes to go with the wine. "Xiaoyao, Department Head Zhang, please come in. I still have a meeting, so I won't be accompanying you." The corners of Xie Dong's mouth twitched. His smiling face looked like it was the real deal, but his tone was neither cold nor warm. There was a hint of vigilance as he maintained his distance. Wang Xiaoyao nodded, and the two of them brushed past each other. Wang Xiaoyao walked into the villa and suddenly whispered, "Brother Xie has the ability to work." It's not an exaggeration to describe him as smart and capable. However, his breadth of mind was inevitably lacking. If it was 10 years ago, it would have been fine, but now it was still the same. Elder Xie was inevitably disappointed. This kind of person is very suitable to serve in the army, but to be in charge of a region and to be a high-ranking official, he is somewhat unqualified. Brother Xie is the best assistant. I'm afraid I'll only end up harming myself and others if I take up the post. The corner of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth twitched, but she didn't say anything. "Umph, you brat. Did you say those words on purpose for this old man to hear?" In the dining room, an old but vigorous voice rang out. Wang Xiaoyao smiled mischievously. "Elder Xie really has a sharp ear and eyes. Just listen to my unintentional words. Brother Xie was cold and indifferent at the door just now. Since I'm not welcome, then I must retaliate. Get in." In the dining room, the old man laughed and scolded. Wang Xiaoyao and Zhang Xiaohua looked at each other and walked into the villa dining room. Wine glasses had been placed on the clean and tidy marble table, and the special moutai had just been opened. There was a stack of peanuts, stir-fried cabbage, stir-fried meat with green peppers, and a salad tomato. The old man, who was already a little stooped, held the wine glass and drank slowly. It seemed that he had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Wang Xiaoyao come in, Xie Kun, whose face already had age spots, twitched the corners of his mouth. There is obviously a problem with your current position. How dare that kid get too close to you? He has long been dissatisfied with some of Wu Yue's problems in the past few years, and he is not optimistic about Wang Qinglei. It's good enough for him to give you a smile when you come here now. Do you still want him to drink and chat with you? He put the wine glass in his hand on the table and sighed softly. But what you said is also reasonable. My son is more than enough to be an assistant. It's indeed not enough to take charge of an area alone. He can control the details, but in terms of the overall situation, he shook his head. A city in Yuzhou can also be replaced by someone who ascends to heaven. Your prestige is still there. Brother Xia's future is not hindered. Wang Xiaoyao said quietly. Xia Kuan had 3 children in his life, 2 boys and 1 girl. His daughter was now the dean of a college in Huaqing University and a famous professor in the Ministry of Education. She had students all over the world. His second son had no interest in an official career and was doing business in the southeast. He had no great wisdom. However, Elder Xia's position in the southeast group and the care of the Wang family of Beihai were enough to make Elder Xia's youngest son a rich man. In such a situation, his eldest son, Xie Dong, was his successor. But as Wang Xiaoyao said, Xie Dong's working ability was extremely strong, but his vision was a little low. It was difficult for him to really take charge of an area alone. This defect had been exposed little by little when Xie Dong was at the grassroots level. Although he had made a lot of progress in these years, his character made him too easy to study the details. It was not easy to change. Therefore, Xie Kuan brought him to the Ministry of Personnel. Obviously, he intended to let Xie Dong take another path. If everything went well this year, Xie Dong would be promoted to the Governor General in the position of Deputy of the Ministry of Personnel. 5 years later, he would be transferred to the Ministry of Supervision. It was indeed a defect for the eldest son to take charge of an area alone. But if he was a deputy, he could be anyone's right-hand man. As Xie Kuan's successor, Xie Kuan had to push his eldest son into the parliament. In all the provinces and departments of Zhongzhou State, there were only 2 places that could accommodate deputies at the level of councillors. The first was the first deputy of the Ministry of Supervision, and the second was the first deputy of the National Parliament. Xie Kuan used to be a councillor and controlled the Ministry of Supervision. The Ministry of Supervision had always been the traditional area of the Southeast Group. Therefore, becoming the first deputy of the Ministry of Supervision and smoothly entering the parliament was Xie Dong's future direction. Xie Kuan glanced at Wang Xiaoyao and did not say much. He simply said, "Sit down." Wang Xiaoyao handed the pork knuckle in his hand to Zhang Xiaohua. When she took the cooked food to the kitchen, he opened the gift he brought this time. In the square box was a piece of top-grade Hitian jade with a warm and soft color. "Senior Xie, I know you like to make seals. What do you think of this material? It took me a lot of effort to get it. It can make about 5 seals. I want 3, and the remaining 2 will be the handling fee. What do you think?" Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. Xie Kuan was stunned. Looking at the top-grade Hitian jade in front of him, his eyes were soft and happy. He carefully took the box and played with the jade inside. After a while, he said calmly, 3 seals. Who are you going to give them to?" "Of course I want one." "Well, Chu Jianchao from Huading. You should know him. Like you, he is also very fond of all kinds of seals. I plan to give 1 to him and the 3rd to Qinglei." Wang Xiaoyao replied. Xie Kuan played with the jade with a faint smile. He used to be a council member of Zhongzhou State and the Minister of Supervision. Before becoming a council member, he was the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel when he served as a member of Parliament. Because of this, he could have such a strong influence in the Southeast Group. He was so powerful that even though he had retired for more than 10 years, he could rely on his remaining power to push his not-so-outstanding son into the Parliament. With his identity, the significance of giving a seal was by no means ordinary. There was no doubt that Wang Xiaoyao was telling him clearly that he needed his support. The sound of Zhang Xiaohua cutting cooked food came from the kitchen. Xie Kuan was silent for a while and said lightly, "Do you want to intervene in Wu Yue's affairs?" "Old Ji is a little anxious." Wang Xiaoyao said slowly, "Wu Yue can't be chaotic. For you and Wang Qinglei, It can't be chaotic. Siak Cohen said quietly. Now there are many voices inside. Although the opinions are different, they are generally the same. You want me to support you, but how can I explain to them? When communicated with me yesterday, he wants Lu Xiangyang to go to Wuyue, and I didn't object. Wang Xiaoyao's pupils contracted slightly. He was no stranger to the name of Lu Xiangyang. He was a deputy governor inspector of the Ministry of Supervision. His rank was very high, but he had no specific position in the Ministry of Supervision. It seemed to be an idle position. But in fact, in a special government like the Ministry of Supervision, this kind of inspector with rank but no obvious real power was the real main force of supervision. Lu Xiangyang was Ji Wenjiang's confidant and also a fierce tiger beside him. He was experienced and full of courage. By putting him in Wuyue, Ji Wenjiang obviously planned to fight with Wang Qinglei to the death in the last period of the election. I know this person. Wang Xiaoyao smiled and said, but I think it's more appropriate to put him in Huoding. Lu Xiangyang could never go to Wuyue. With his ability and the fact that he was ordered to make trouble, he could almost be unscrupulous. In a situation where the whole Wuyue was in a panic, Wang Qinglei wanted to go further, but there was great resistance. Huoding is peaceful. What did he do there? Siak Cohen ate a peanut with a smile. Wang Xiaoyao gently gritted his teeth. He was seeking Siak Cohen's support, and Siak Cohen was now forcing him to play his trump card. His and Wang Qinglei's bottom line was to keep Wuyue. For this reason, they had to give up Yu Chunguang's team in Huoding, transfer the core force to Wuyue to stabilize the situation, and give the interest in Huoding to the Southeast Group. But obviously, this little interest could not make Siak Cohen support Wang Xiaoyao. Putting Lu Xiangyang in Wuyue was to let him make trouble and make Wang Qinglei anxious. This itself was beneficial to the Southeast Group. If they could take the opportunity to take back part of Wuyue's power, it would be even more beneficial. The Southeast Group would also gain something by transferring Chu Jianchao to Wuyue and letting Lu Xiangyang go to Huoding, but it was only a position in the Ministry of Supervision. Lu Xiangyang wanted to make trouble. But what were the conditions and bargaining chips? What Siak Cohen wanted from Wang Xiaoyao now was this bargaining chip. This was a transaction with a clear price. Wang Xiaoyao wanted Wuyue. The Southeast Group could give it to him, but what they wanted was not the little interest Wang Xiaoyao had in Huoding. After they gave up Wuyue, their strategic goal was the whole Huoding. Exchanging Huoding for Wuyue, such a deal was fair and acceptable to both sides. Wang Xiaoyao might not be able to directly hand over the whole Huoding to the Southeast Group, but the bargaining chips he gave must let the Southeast Group see that they had the hope to take over Huoding. Wang Xiaoyao had been operating in Huoding for many years, so he definitely had such bargaining chips. The key was whether he dared to give it to him. Huoding was now the backyard of no group, and the forces of all the major groups had infiltrated it. But the current speaker of Huoding was one of the leaders of the Prince Group, and the Prince Group had a great advantage and influence in Huoding. Wang Xiaoyao's bargaining chips were undoubtedly tantamount to attacking everything of the Prince Group in Huoding. Coincidentally, after he and Wang Qinglei betrayed Mount Dibing, they joined the Prince Group. Chapter 1239. So, there's still no news at the moment? In the luxurious palace where Wang Shengxiao lived on Mount Dibing, he looked at Xian Ming and asked softly, holding his sleeping son in one hand. No, I contacted the military counselor of Emperor Dong's palace a few months ago and kept in touch recently. They also have no news of the little princess. Xian Ming, who was in charge of all the intelligence work of the Wang family of Beihai on Mount Dibing, shook his head and looked a little pale. There was some tiredness in Wang Shengxiao's eyes. After a moment of silence, he asked softly, "What did Li Tianlan say?" Xian Ming was stunned and said in a low voice, "He said nothing." However, the recent actions of Emperor Dong's palace are obvious. Keep looking. Wang Shengxiao took a deep breath and said, "Find out where she is and who else besides us in Emperor Dong's palace." His eyes were extremely cold. Who on earth is looking for her? It had been nearly 3 years since Wang Yuetong left Mount Dibing. Since Li Tianlan swept across Beihai from Autumn Water to Mount Dibing in Shenzhou, Wang Yuedong disappeared from everyone's sight. For nearly 3 years, both the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace had never given up looking for her. Northeast Yuzhou Beihai, Yinzhou, Dongshan, Huading, Jiangzhou, and even Tianan, the people in charge of the intelligence of the two superpowers kept sorting out all kinds of details, but they never found any effective clues. But Wang Xingxiao and Li Tianlan did not forget her. The most important thing was that the enemies of the two superpowers also did not forget Wang Yuedong. Chen Fangqing's original plan termination was mainly aimed at Wang Yuedong, and the fierce reaction of the Wang family of Beihai caused the most serious conflict in decades between Mount Dibing and Zhongzhou State. Although the situation was under control, the rift between the two sides was getting deeper and deeper. With the rise of the Aurora Legion in Snow Country, the Beihai Corps began to recruit soldiers from Beihai Province under Wang Xingxiao's order. Today, although the Beihai Corps had lost some of its core elite combat forces, its overall size had changed from 200,000 to a supercorps with a total size close to the Border Control Corps and nearly 500,000 soldiers. After the plan termination was exposed, Li Tianlan's reaction was also fierce and vicious. The death of Chen Fangqing's daughter and granddaughter was a beginning. Chen Fangqing and Chen Shi's deaths were not the end either. It hadn't been long since Chen Fangqing's death, but the Chen family had been losing members during this period of time. The former young mistress of the Chen family, Murong Xiao, was not punished after her affair with Yuan Lin was exposed. The next day, she was taken to Tianan. Now, it was said that she was the treasurer of the Xianyuan City branch of Sky City, a top-notch club under the Emperor Dong's palace. Countless people in Xianyuan City expressed a strong interest in this young lady of the Chen family. Although no one could get her yet, they were just waiting for the right price. It could be imagined what would happen to Murong Xiao in the future. The disgraced Yuan Lin committed suicide on the second day after the trial. Whether it was true or not, at least that was the conclusion. It was said that Chen Fangqing's grandson, who had just entered university, owed a huge gambling debt overseas and was retaliated against by the underworld forces overseas. He was shot 16 times and forced to die. Nearly 20 of Chen Fangqing's relatives had met with accidents one after another in this short period of time. Car accidents, murders, suicides, and all kinds of other things were happening one after another. Today, the entire Qin clan had completely withered away, and the few remaining core members probably wouldn't be able to live for long. Li Tianlan's arrogant and almost unscrupulous revenge completely revealed a posture of madness. His attitude was very obvious. That was, he wanted to completely destroy the Chen family. The prince group had also made a symbolic intervention. However, after a certain general who couldn't stand the Chen family's plight expressed his opinion and disappeared with his family that night, the entire prince group no longer paid any attention to the Chen family, which was no longer of any use. The cause of all this could be said to be the plan of termination proposed by Chen Fangqing. It was a good name, because although this plan did not end Wang Yuedong, it succeeded in ending his family. But with such bloody means before, until today, there were still people who wanted to get Wang Yuedong. 3 days ago, the intelligence agency of the Wang family of Beihai received accurate information that in addition to their own people looking for Wang Yuedong, there were other people looking for her. This was not surprising, and it would not be exposed in a short time. After all, Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai had always had clues. But the key was that in order not to cause any misunderstanding, Xian Ming and military counselor had been in touch with each other not frequently, but not estranged from looking for Wang Yuedong. After confirming that those people did not belong to Emperor Dong's palace, Xian Ming and military counselor were completely nervous. Wang Yuedong was undoubtedly one of the untouchable reverse scales of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Although she seemed to have nothing to do with them, the two superpowers cared about her, which could be seen from their tireless search for her in the past 3 years. The consequences of this exposure were absolutely disastrous. But if they could control Wang Yuedong in advance, it was foreseeable that the gain would also be incomparably huge. A crisis was an absolute danger and a great opportunity. In Zhongzhou State, at this time, Too many people wanted to know Wang Yuedong's whereabouts. At the very least, if they found Wang Yuedong, even if they did not dare to hurt her, they could tell the two superpowers about her information in exchange for endless benefits. Fishing in troubled waters. Wang Yuedong was undoubtedly one of the big fish now. Who is looking for Yuetong? Have you found out? Wang Shengxiao asked faintly. No. Xianming was a little helpless. The other party looked very alert and did not leave any clues. There are really people who don't know what's good for them. Wang Shengxiao sneered. Continue to investigate. Don't miss any clues. I want to see who is so bold. If we want to find Yuedong, we can't miss the clues of that group of people. Xianming nodded and did not speak. Is it possible that it is the academics? Wang Shengxiao suddenly asked. It's not very likely. Xianming thought for a while and shook his head. Your Highness, I don't know if you have noticed that although the academics and Emperor Dong's palace are still in a deadlock recently, their relationship seems to be easing. At this time, if the academics look for the little princess, they will lose more than they gain. Even if they have other purposes for us, they won't provoke Li Tianlan. That makes sense. Wang Shengxiao nodded. But we still need to pay attention to what we should. We can't be careless. Xianming grunted. That silly girl is too stubborn. I don't know how much she has suffered outside these years. She has been spoiled since she was a child. Now, he did not continue, but there was unconcealable worry in his eyes. If Xianming wanted to say something but stopped, then he was shocked and suddenly shut up. No one knew how powerful the intelligence network of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace was. They had not found anyone for nearly 3 years. Xianming's bad feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Wang Yuedong was not in the thunder-shocking realm when she left Beihai. In this realm, she was an expert in the outside world, but she was definitely not an unsolvable expert. If there was really an accident, Xianming shook his head suddenly. Wang Shengxiao glanced at him coldly and said in a cold voice, "What do you want to say?" "Nothing." Xianming smiled bitterly. "Get out." Wang Shengxiao's voice was cold. "Continue to investigate. No matter how much it costs, you must find her." Chapter 1240. I'll go to Huading or Tianan in the near future to contact military counselor in person and strengthen our cooperation. Xianming said slowly. Did the little princess take any money when she left Beihai? No. Wang Shengxiao shook his head. The last time she withdrew money was on the 3rd day after she left Beihai. She was in Yuzhou and withdrew 30,000 yuan. My mother gave her a bank card, and she never touched it again. In the past few years, we have searched almost all the major cities we should look for, but we have no clues. If we continue to look for her, we can only continue to look for her in all the cities and even counties in the country. In short, I'll do my best. Xianming smiled bitterly and shook his head subconsciously. Zhongzhou State was a vast land with abundant resources. If a person with extraordinary strength was determined to hide, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. After all, Wang Yuedong was different from a wanted criminal. No matter how difficult it was to deal with a wanted criminal, he would leave some clues and traces. But Wang Yuedong did not conform to the law of hiding. If she changed her identity, it would be difficult to find her in a lifetime. Li Tianlan has talked to Zhou Yinhai about this matter. The police department is also working hard. It is said that the cabinet has a plan to promote a new census. The police department has issued the document. I hope there will be clues as soon as possible. Xianming said softly. Wang Shengxiao was silent. The police department issued a notice to look for Wang Yuedong. It could be said that the whole country was looking for Wang Yuedong. Li Tianlan and Zhou Yinhai were getting closer and closer, and the new group was getting more and more mature. Wang Shengxiao could clearly feel the power in his words and deeds. If there are no clues, we can change our direction. He said calmly, find out who is inquiring about Yuetong. If we want to protect her, we don't have to find her. It's the same to control those who dare to have ideas about her. Xianming was stunned and nodded. Although it was not easy, it was much easier than looking for a person with no clues. He thought for a while and suddenly said softly, Your Highness, if you really find the little princess, do you want her to go back to Mount Dibbing? Or do you want her to go back to the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Shengxiao was stunned and did not speak for a while. Xianming looked at him and said nothing. It might be too early to talk about this topic, but it was definitely a problem that could not be avoided. Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace attached great importance to Wang Yuetong. They had been looking for her since she disappeared and never gave up. The Wang family of Beihai also never gave up. Now that she had not been found, the two sides could cooperate on this issue and even exchange information. But once Wang Yuetong was found, everything would be different. There was no doubt that Wang Yuetong had become a key figure between the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Once her whereabouts were confirmed, her existence could cause the two great powers to become more harmonious. At the same time, it was possible for the two great powers to erupt into even more intense conflicts. Xianming could imagine Wang Yuetong's dilemma. If it wasn't so difficult, she wouldn't have been hiding all this time. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a long time before he said softly, "I respect your choice. No matter what, it's good that you're safe." Xianming nodded. Now Wang Shengxiao had the strength to let Wang Yuetong choose freely. Maybe he was still not Li Tianlan's match, but it was not easy for Li Tianlan to kill him. If they were on Mount Dibbing, his personal combat capability was only a little weaker than Li Tianlan's. He was capable of protecting both Wang Yuetong and the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Shengxiao shook his head and got rid of all the messy thoughts in his mind. He said softly, "Go do your work." Xianming turned and left. Wang Shengxiao sat quietly in his seat. After a while, he lowered his head and looked at his sleeping son in his arms. His little body was curled up, and he was sucking a finger with his little mouth. Wang Shengxiao smiled and reached out to touch his face gently. His eyes were unprecedentedly soft. Light footsteps could be heard coming from upstairs. Song Xiai, in pajamas, slowly went downstairs and said softly, "Is Xianming gone? Is there any news of Yuetong?" Wang Shengxiao shook his head, sighed, and murmured, "Who knows where that girl is?" Song Xiai took her son from Wang Shengxiao's arms and said softly, "Don't worry." When Yuetong left, she was already at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. In the past few years, even if she didn't meditate, she could smoothly enter the thunder-shocking realm. Even if she encountered an accident, she could completely match an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in a short time. How many experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm are there in the entire Zhongzhou state? And they must know her. Until now, there's been no news, which can only mean that Yuetong is not in any danger. She is very safe now. I'm not worried about her safety, but it's unreasonable for her to be floating outside all the time. Wang Shengxiao said helplessly, "Even if she really went to Emperor Dong's palace now, I'll accept it. Maybe she still can't figure it out." Song Xiai said softly, "But she will figure it out eventually. When she figures it out, she will be mature." Wang Shengxiao nodded silently. "Let's go to rest." Song Xiai smiled and stretched out her small hand to pull Wang Shengxiao's sleeve. Her voice was hoarse, with a touch of faint charm. "He said he would accompany me tonight." A faint sound, a voice, suddenly sounded from the upstairs corridor. Song Xiai and Wang Shengxiao looked up at the same time. In the corridor on the second floor, Tang Shi, who now controlled the huge economy of the Wang family of Beihai and was Wang Shengxiao's fiancée in terms of identity, stood there quietly, looking down at them. There was no expression on her beautiful face. Wang Shengxiao coughed dryly. "Sleep?" Tang Shi looked at Wang Shengxiao and asked in a lukewarm voice. Wang Shengxiao was a little confused. The relationship between Tang Shi and Song Xiai had never been harmonious. Her mother had mentioned that during the 2 years they had left Mount Dibbing, the relationship between the two was not bad. Song Xiai was pregnant for 10 months. Tang Shi took good care of her and was very fond of their son, Hao Yin. As Wang Shengxiao's strength soared, they returned to Mount Dibbing. The relationship between the two seemed to be back to before they left Mount Dibbing, or even better. Song Xiai had already carried on the Wang family of Beihai. When Tang Shi was alone with Wang Shengxiao, she clearly said that she also wanted a child. In terms of time, today was the right day. After Song Xiai gave birth to a child, her needs seemed to be much greater than before. She was unwilling to let him go easily, saying that no one took care of the child in the middle of the night. However, the three of them lived together now. When the two women faced each other, it was really a battle of swords all the time. Choose one yourself. Song Si held her son and looked at Wang Shengxiao with a smile, dignified and charming. Ahem, Wang Shengxiao coughed dryly. Well, before he could finish his words, his phone rang as if it was a life-saving call. Wang Shengxiao's face suddenly changed. He took out his cell phone and said with a smile, "I'll answer the call first." Senior Xie's words flashed on the screen. Wang Shengxiao narrowed his eyes and immediately answered the call, whispering, "Senior Xie." "Yes." Xie Kuan chuckled at the other end of the phone and said directly, "Xiao Yao just left my place. Now you can act." Wang Shengxiao took a deep breath, nodded, and said calmly, "I see. Senior Xie, thank you for your hard work." Xie Kuan hung up the phone with a smile. Wang Shengxiao put down his cell phone and looked at the two beautiful women who were looking at each other and trying to kill each other with their eyes. He said with a smile, "You two can sleep tonight." Sure, move in. When Hao Hian wakes up tonight, you can help take care of him." "Where are you going?" Tang Shi and Song Si turned their heads at the same time and looked at Wang Shengxiao. Wang Shengxiao played with the cell phone and said calmly, "To Beihai Prison." Chapter 1241. The invisible submarine gradually sank on the surface of the sea. The roaring and undulating waves gradually became quiet. The light was getting weaker, and the surroundings began to become dark and quiet. Under the tremendous pressure, the water in the ocean was like a solid painting that had solidified. The submarine's light pierced the darkness of the deep sea and kept moving forward according to the instructions of the radar. In the small room of the well-lit submarine, Wang Shengxiao silently looked at the flashing signal on the screen in front of him, looking extremely patient and calm. Beihai Prison was one of the most expensive projects of the Wang family of Beihai in hundreds of years, and it naturally became the most secret prison in the world. Its protective measures were much more exaggerated than those of the desert prison in Zhongzhou State. This prison built in the deep sea was not big, and its original intention was not to be a large prison. Its small scale could be said to be exquisite, and it could probably only hold less than 200 prisoners inside. But to be able to build a stable prison in the deep sea, in addition to the huge funds behind it, it also proved that the Wang family of Beihai had almost the top technical level in this regard. Large-scale deep-sea operations of more than 600 meters underwater, not to mention when Beihai Prison was established. Even today, few countries in the world could do it. The prison was far away from Beihai. It was a disc-shaped building. This small-scale prison was insanely equipped with nearly 400 sets of automatic weapon systems, which could be said to be armed to the teeth. Under such circumstances, not to mention the low possibility of fugitive or the survival problem of the other party under the great pressure of the deep sea, even if someone could really do these two things, with more than 400 sets of weapon systems, Beihai only needed to press a button to completely destroy all life within 10 nautical miles around the prison in just a few seconds. This prison had been completed for more than 200 years. It was originally proposed by the chosen one of Beihai's ancestors. After generations of continuous hard work and debugging, it took hundreds of years to build Beihai Prison. Today, it was in a state of huge loss. The word loss had nothing to do with the prison. But extremely special prisons like Beihai Prison and the Desert Prison all took on a different mission. This prison was special. This also meant that the prisoners who were qualified to be imprisoned here were also special. And for the big forces like Zhongzhou State or the Wang family of Beihai, such specialness also meant extraordinary benefits. Ordinary prisoners were not qualified to be imprisoned here at all. For the prisoners who were qualified to be locked up here, perhaps a casual word from them could be invaluable information, which could make the Wang family of Beihai gain a lot. North Sea Prison had been built for more than 200 years, and it had locked up a total of 70 prisoners. They were famous traders who were branded in the history books, top secret agents who controlled huge resources, the founder and inventor of a certain cutting-edge technology, the master of a super force in the dark world, the elusive killer, the infamous Kong Bu. In addition, two patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai had successfully broken through to the peak of the invincible realm. There were also two patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai who broke the limit of the thunder-shocking realm and stepped into the domain of the invincible realm. The existence of the North Sea prison was a legend to North Sea, and it had extraordinary significance. No one could deny the great contribution this place had made to the North Sea. But the truth was undeniable. Since the establishment of North Sea prison, it had always been in a state of loss. For more than 200 years, Beihai had trained invincible realm experts here and obtained unimaginable benefits from every prisoner here. Their status had gradually improved, and their power had been expanding. But all these gains were still not comparable to the terrifying cost of establishing Beihai prison and the annual maintenance cost invested in Beihai prison to this day. How much did it cost to build North Sea prison? From the time when the chosen one of Beihai's ancestors put forward the idea to the time when the second patriarch took over the power of the Wang family of Beihai, North Sea prison had burned nearly 80 billion. It was star dollars. At that time, the Zhongzhou dollar had not appreciated according to the economic trend. At that time, 80 billion star dollars was equivalent to more than 400 billion Zhongzhou dollars. And what did they get by burning this money? It was not North Sea prison, not even the prototype of North Sea prison. The more than 400 billion was a lot of experimental data, as well as a prison model that existed in theory and drawings. The burning of money had started at that time. Then 100 years, 200 years, 250 years. It was burning money every year. The Zhongzhou dollar was appreciating. Now, one Zhongzhou dollar was equivalent to 3 star dollars. During the hundreds of years of the entire North Sea prison, from concept to construction to completion to maintenance, the Wang family of Beihai had burned nearly 3 trillion Zhongzhou dollars. 3 trillion. And it was just the data published on the surface. As the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Shengxiao knew that this data was greatly exaggerated. In fact, the cost was more than twice the published data. This was equivalent to the wealth created by the Wang family of Beihai for decades at its peak. Until now, the Wang family of Beihai had to invest tens of billions of Zhongzhou dollars every year in order to maintain North Sea prison, update equipment, and set up weapons. This was just daily maintenance. This was one of the most expensive projects of the Wang family of Beihai since its establishment. There were only 2 projects that could compare with the cost of North Sea prison in the entire North Sea. The first was the North Sea Refuge, and the second was the numerous laboratory projects in North Sea. The entire dark world had different comments on North Sea prison. But one thing was undeniable. If the Wang family of Beihai had not built North Sea prison, or if the construction requirements had been lower and the unimaginable wealth had been used on its own expansion, the Wang family of Beihai today would definitely be stronger than it was now. Many people thought that North Sea prison was a joke. It was even a product of the Wang family of Beihai showing off its strength and wealth. Even many people of the Wang family of Beihai thought so, except for the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai. Today's Wang family of Beihai, perhaps even Summer Solstice, did not understand what North Sea prison meant. As the patriarch, Wang Shengxiao knew very well that this was a trump card and also the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. Beihai used the wealth that could make it stronger to create North Sea prison. It to give up some things, but one day it would get more. Just like the day he met Lin Shi. They went from Tian'an to West Africa and from Africa to Beihai. When they came to North Sea prison, those people gave the same comments. On that day, Lin Shi stood in the submarine and looked at the outline of North Sea prison. After a long silence, he said, "What is this?" And the apostle who followed him said with a smile, "This is a very interesting thing. To be exact, if the current technology does not develop explosively, this is a trump card that can ensure that the Wang family of Beihai will stand at the peak for 1,000 years." This was the apostle's comment. Chapter 1242. The submarine continued to move forward. On the screen, the small green dot representing the submarine was infinitely close to the small red dot of the destination. The surroundings suddenly became extremely quiet. The slightly dull sound of water flow completely disappeared at a certain moment, and so did the sound of the submarine running. The two lampposts that had been illuminating the dark, deep sea became scattered at the same time as all the sound disappeared. The dazzling light scattered into dense spots of light. The submarine shook violently in silence. The engine instantly lost control and began to fall. Inside the submarine, Wang Shengxiao, who was standing quietly in front of the screen, flicked his fingers. A stream of sword energy passed through the submarine and merged with the outside world. The submarine's falling momentum stopped, and then the whole submarine seemed to be pulled by an external force and began to accelerate. Wang Shengxiao's aura continued to rise. In the blink of an eye, the whole submarine was filled with sword intent. He stood quietly, spreading his sword intent to feel the environment outside the submarine. This was the deep sea hundreds of meters below, but there was no seawater at all within 10,000 meters of the submarine. The huge outline of North Sea prison was constantly becoming clearer under the perception of Wang Shengxiao's sword intent. With North Sea prison as the center, every 3 to 5 seconds, there would be an incredible stream of sword energy spreading out from North Sea prison. The mighty sword qi swept about, tearing apart the space within 10,000 meters around the prison, tearing apart every drop of seawater. The unimaginable sword qi kept whistling, opening up a vacuum of 10,000 meters in the deep sea, which was hundreds of meters deep. The sword energy rose in North Sea prison and swept to the edge of the vacuum and seawater. The deep sea was constantly turbulent with the sword energy, forming a huge whirlpool of 10,000 meters in the deep sea. The whirlpool rushed straight to the surface of the sea with a terrifying undercurrent, and the entire nearby sea was surging. Wang Shengxiao's submarine had already left the sea at this time and was pulled closer by the sword energy of North Sea prison in the vacuum state. The sword energy was whistling and turbulent silently. Within the scope of the sword energy, all sounds were completely suppressed. Even light was torn apart by the ubiquitous but invisible sword energy and scattered everywhere. Wang Shengxiao could sense the surging and roaring of the endless seawater at the edge of the sword energy. It was the power of the endless ocean, which turned into a whirlpool and an undercurrent, spreading from the deep sea to the surface. It was like the breathing of the sea, but to be more precise, it was the breathing of the Sword Emperor. Chaos and snow, country since the end. Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong's whereabouts had been unknown. There had been countless speculations about what had happened to Wang Tianzong in the Dark World. Some people said that he had been seriously injured by the Eternal Sword and his martial arts foundation had been completely destroyed. Instead of returning to Beihai, he had been left to fend for himself in a corner. Some people said that Wang Tianzong was seriously injured and dying, and he was hiding in Beihai to recover. Some people also said that Wang Tianzong had died, but the Wang family of Beihai kept his secret. There were many speculations, but no one knew where Wang Tianzong was. Only a few core people on Mount Dibbing knew. Wang Tianzong had been secretly recuperating in Beihai prison. This was the safest place in the Wang family of Beihai. In other words, it was a place that could guarantee that Wang Tianzong would not be affected by any external force. Before he officially woke up, this place was the strongest barrier of the Wang family of Beihai. Everything in front of him could prove Wang Tianzong's situation at this time, and it could also prove the strength of the Chosen One. The sword light that crisscrossed the deep sea showed that Wang Tianzong had recovered his consciousness to a certain extent, but his kendo and will were always out of control, so such a horrible scene was created. The sword energy code on Wang Shengxiao, which allowed him to fight Li Tianlan alone, was also the greatest gift of Wang Tianzong, who was in a trance, to the Wang family of Beihai, and it was also all he could do at present. This showed that Wang Tianzong was still struggling on the edge of life and death. Even so, in a seriously injured state, Wang Tianzong, who had recovered some consciousness, was still showing his strength. His kendo and will, which were out of control, were constantly fighting against the whole sea area around him as he breathed. As the vacuum of Beihai prison grew bigger and bigger, Wang Tianzong's kendo and would slowly recover little by little. When this vacuum suddenly disappeared one day, it was likely that Wang Tianzong's consciousness would be fully recovered, and he would be able to use his kendo, and will initially. So every time he saw this scene, Wang Shengxiao always felt very at ease. The sword energy surging out of Beihai prison was so turbulent, which meant that his father's condition was getting better little by little. Today's Wang family of Beihai, because of the sword energy coat, did not lack the top combat capability. But in Wang Shengxiao's heart, he still could not be regarded as the pillar of Mount Dibbing. The pillar that could support Mount Dibbing, the entire Beihai province, and the pride of more than 20 million people in Beihai, was still his father. Li Tianlan was invincible. Li Tianlan's kendo was perfect. Xin Yuan Feng's sharpness shocked the world. All of this was a fact that could be seen by the whole world. But Wang Shengxiao was very clear, and Wang Shengxiao believed that Li Tianlan also knew that no matter how fancy Emperor Dong's palace was now, Li Tianlan's invincible name was only because Wang Tianzong did not show up. Li Tianlan was indeed very strong now, but at present, he was not a match for the Chosen One. Even if he had Xin Yuan Feng, which was full of energy, he could not. Wang Shengxiao sighed softly, and his eyes shone. Endless sword energy surged out from his body and completely merged with the sword energy of Beihai prison. The sword energy coat on his body quickly recovered to its peak state. In this vacuum, because the sword energy was of the same origin, Wang Shengxiao and everyone on the ship also regained the ability to move and breathe freely. The submarine was pulled close to Beihai prison by the sword energy. In a vacuum without seawater, the submarine and the prison gate opened at the same time. Shrouded by the familiar sword energy, Wang Shengxiao, who was completely relaxed, walked into the prison. Small and gentle electric lights hung in the bronze-colored corridor of the prison. The ordinary-looking but extraordinarily charming female, Saint, stood at the end of the corridor to greet him. Seeing Wang Shengxiao coming over, she nodded gently and said in a flat tone, "Come to visit His Majesty?" The Wang family of Beihai provided the foundation of Lin Shi's group of 3 in West Africa. In return, Saint was responsible for making Wang Tianzong recover. This was a sincere cooperation between both sides, and no one played tricks. Hundreds of thousands of troops belonging to the Wang family of Beihai in the West African Divine Martial Corps had begun to be taken over by Lin Shi. After Saint came to the Wang family of Beihai, she also did her best to treat Wang Tianzong and made good progress. At the same time, because of her joining, the Wang family of Beihai's gene potions, which were already at the top level in the world, continued to make breakthroughs. Several kinds of gene potions under research have been semi-finished. At least so far, both sides were very satisfied with each other's existence in this cooperation. Yes, Wang Shengxiao nodded and then smiled. But the main purpose of coming here today is to pick someone up. His voice was very soft, but his eyes were full of expectation. Chapter 1243. Wang Tianzong was in the largest cell of Beihai prison. It was called a cell, but in fact it could be said to be the most technologically advanced ward. The spacious room, which was like a hall, was full of all kinds of medical equipment. Countless data was scrolling on the screen every minute and second. The top group of the Beihai Biological Laboratory watched Wang Tianzong 24 hours a day, observing his situation, injecting drugs, recording, and constantly thinking about various treatment plans. Just like last time, Wang Shengxiao stood in front of Wang Tianzong's hibernation chamber for a moment, and finally shook his head and walked out. His Majesty's recovery has been speeding up recently. The potion you used on him before was correct. His condition is very dangerous. That potion is one of the best choices at present, and it can greatly stabilize his body. Even if it's me, what I can make won't be much better than that potion, and it will take time. Saint followed Wang Shengxiao, and her tone was still calm. But that potion seems to be incomplete. In my calculation, it should be able to play a greater role. Saint just began to formally contact a series of treatment plans for Wang Tianzong these days. She had been to Beihai prison once before. Although the two sides cooperated at the beginning, How could the Wang family of Beihai really trust her and Lin Shi, who were of unknown origin? Saint herself could detect more than a dozen tests. It was not until yesterday that the Wang family of Beihai initially let down its guard and showed her some data of Wang Tianzong's body. Then the current person in charge of the laboratory discussed with her for nearly a night. After further confirming Saint's real talent and knowledge in this aspect, and further confirming that she really had no malice, he officially allowed her to begin to integrate into the work of saving Wang Tianzong. To be exact, Saint had only been in contact with Wang Tianzong for a few hours, but she had already made several useful suggestions to the laboratory and sorted out their treatment plans immediately. You should be talking about the body of the god of war. Wang Xingxiao thought for a moment. But that's half, and only half. The body of the god of war? Saint's mouth twitched, and she seemed to be a little dissatisfied. Her eyes were a little cold. What's wrong? Wang Xingxiao looked at her strangely. Saint took a deep breath and didn't say anything. She came from the god of war's realm, and the word god of war meant a lot to her. It wasn't just a simple belief. Now, a piece of trash genetic potion, although it was close to the top in the real environment, still made her a little uncomfortable in the name of the god of war. Why is it only half? Saint asked expressionlessly. My mother gave the other half to someone else. Wang Shengxiao said quietly. He still didn't know who his mother had given that half of the body of the god of war to. Saint was silent for a moment, as if he was thinking about something. Finally, he nodded. Where is Lin Shi? Wang Shengxiao asked suddenly. He has arrived in West Africa and has begun to sort out the interior of the Divine Martial Army. His Highness will use the Divine Martial Army as the foundation to take over the rule of the Dark World of Africa as soon as possible. Saint said faintly, it will probably take 1 or 2 years. Wang Shengxiao nodded silently. If it was someone else who said it would take a year or 2 to inform the Dark World of Continent, Wang Shengxiao wouldn't believe it. Continent was a complicated place. The Divine Martial Army was known as the #1 army of Continent, but it only had a slight advantage. Now, all the superpowers in the Dark World, except for Emperor Dong's palace who hadn't had time to intervene in Continent, almost all the superpowers had spokesmen in Continent. If Lin Shi took over Tianzong and wanted to conquer Continent, there would be a lot of friction with these superpowers. This could also further strengthen the cooperative relationship between the two sides. If possible, if Beihai can lend us some masters when necessary, the time will be faster. Saint continued to speak. Lin Shi was undoubtedly a master, and the apostle beside Lin Shi was an expert among experts. If they really went all out, the apostle could be said to be the strongest among the 3 of them at present. Even Saint, who had the worst combat capability, could not be threatened by ordinary experts of the invincible realm. But now the extreme suppression of the real environment almost locked the strength of the 3 of them. If it was in the same environment a month ago, it wouldn't take them a year or 2 to conquer the Africa land. To put it simply and crudely, the apostle could completely solve any force in the Africa land in a few minutes. Even if there was a plan to cover something up, it wouldn't take more than a week. But now, among the 3 of them, Lin Shi was the least affected, and Saint was in the middle. As for the apostle with the strongest combat capability, it was a complete tragedy now. Conquering the Africa land in a year or 2 was a relatively optimistic statement. Wang Shengxiao frowned, but soon he stretched his brows and chuckled. I can't leave alone. Beihai is too long. As for the others, they're also useful. Let's see how it goes. I can temporarily lend you a master, but he can only leave Zhongzhou State for a short time. He still has to come back as soon as possible. Is he the one we are going to pick up now? Saint asked. Wang Shengxiao said yes. At present, the Wang family of Beihai, not counting my father, not counting my second uncle who has left Mount Dibbing, and not counting my special case, he can be said to be the first master in Beihai and the only invincible realm expert in Mount Dibbing. When necessary, he can go to the Africa land to help you. He is very strong. Saint was silent for a while and said softly, No, not very strong, but very strong. In today's dark world, in terms of pure strength, he is the only one who can approach His Majesty Li Tianlan in terms of strength. She had only known Wang Tianzong for a short time. But the time she spent in Beihai prison was not short. During this time, in addition to improving the existing gene potion technology in Beihai, she also studied the prisoners here, who were not prisoners of prisoners. Saint was naturally very interested in the person who was imprisoned next to Wang Tianzong and could feel the core sword intent of the Chosen One at a close distance every day. She had already gotten the physical data of the other party. It was no exaggeration to say that in terms of pure strength, the other party was only second to Li Tianlan in today's dark world, and even stronger than Wang Shengxiao and Lin Shi. But it was just strength. I can introduce him to you later. In the future, Lin Shi can contact him directly. Mount Dibbing has complete trust in him. Wang Xingxiao walked through the corridor and came to another cell next to Wang Tianzong's. Compared with the medical equipment everywhere in Wang Tianzong's room, this place was decorated as luxuriously and comfortably as a 7-star hotel. Wang Shengxiao stood in front of the door and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. He had not knocked on the door, but he could clearly feel that the space at the door was filled with an indescribable aura. Fierce, violent, condensed, sharp, and fierce. It was like saber radiance, but also like sword energy. It was like a saber or a sword, but it was full of tsunami-like power. Wang Shengxiao chuckled and reached out to knock on the door. In the space behind the door, all the aura paused and then disappeared in an instant. Wang Shengxiao's voice was calm. "Brother Jiang, it's me." Chapter 1244. The wind in Emperor Dong's palace was cool and soft. It blew over the lawn, over the fountain, over the lake, and poured into the boat in the lake, bringing with it black hair wantonly. Wisps of rich fragrance seemed to completely melt in the quiet rain. Li Tianlan sat on the boat, holding a fishing rod in his hand. He looked at the rippling water in front of him and subconsciously rubbed his forehead. "What's wrong?" Qin Weibai leaned lazily on Li Tianlan and put a grape in his mouth. Her voice was a little soft. "It's boring." Li Tianlan shook his head. "I find that I don't like fishing very much. It's a little boring." "Then what do you want to do?" Qin Weibai ate the fruit and said with a smile, "I'll go with you." Li Tianlan thought about it and said seriously, "I don't know." He suddenly felt very confused. He had no direction and no motivation. He didn't want to do anything, but it was boring if he didn't do anything. In the shortest time, he reviewed his life of more than 20 years. He began to temper his body when he was young. He was exposed to martial arts when he was a teenager and desperately wanted to make himself stronger. His coming-of-age ceremony was when he was taken to the desert prison by Thunder God. He lost a fireman when he was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. After he rushed into the thunder-shocking realm, he lost a fireman again. So he abolished his martial arts and began to practice again. That year in the desert prison could be said to be the turning point of his life. Under the great setback, he made his martial arts foundation absolutely perfect. The desperate maze hidden in the darkness under the prison made up for his state of mind and made his will perfect. He entered the Sky Academy at the age of 19. It should have been a slow school life. At that time, in Li Honghe's mind, maybe he wanted him to really adapt to life in Zhongzhou State after leaving the border. He wanted him to completely enter the secular world, grow up slowly, form his own team, and accumulate his own prestige among the younger generation. Li Honghe would also take advantage of this time to pave the way for him with the Dongxing clan. After graduation, he would marry Dongsheng Rushi, enter the Border Control Corps, climb up from the bottom, and completely integrate into the system of Zhongzhou State. 20 years later, Li Tianlan was nearly 40 years old. With the heritage of the Li family and Li Qianlan's talent, it was enough for him to enter the peak of the invincible realm and rank at the top of the divine list. At that time, Li Tianlan could replace Dongxing Wudi as the Marshal of Zhongzhou State, enter the parliament, and control the Border Control Corps. It was only during that period that Li Tianlan, who had the full support of the giant group, was qualified to confront Gu Xingyun, Kunlun City, and even the Wang family of Beihai. With the help of the giant group to overwhelm Kunlun City, the giant group completed the reshuffle of its own group with the help of the interests it obtained. It strengthened its cohesion to the greatest extent and allowed the Dongsheng clan, the Bai family, and the Zhou family to complete the consolidation and integration. After the transformation, the three wealthy families pushed him to the position of the state-protecting war god and ended the cause and effect between him and the Wang family of Beihai. If there were no accidents, this was his life trajectory, and it was also the safest life path for him in the eyes of the Li family and the Dongsheng clan. However, Qin Weibai's appearance completely shattered this trajectory. Even though the Li family had been down and out for many years, it was not to the extent of being forgotten. The heir of the Li family was in the teeth of the storm, and Qin Weibai was the focus of other people's attention. From the moment the two of them met, his life had become extremely abrupt. The Samsara Palace, the final battle of East Island, and the external forces swept over. Li Tianlan was swept to East Island before he could adapt to the real life in the secular world. Then it was a journey from Huading to the polar ground for 3 years, far away from the situation of Zhongzhou State. His life in the academy was about to end before it started. The maneuver of the two academies and the chaos in Snow Country broke out at the same time. Li Tianlan really ushered in his own era. And the beginning of this era was his revisiting his old place and his 2 years in the desert prison. Until now, he was invincible in the world. But looking back along the way, Li Tianlan found that he had almost never really integrated into the prosperity of Zhongzhou State. His goal had always been clear. The pressure and motivation had always surrounded him. He was busy, thinking, struggling, and fighting. He knew what he was doing and what he should do. But now, he lost his direction. Perhaps it was because he had never truly relaxed before. So when he truly relaxed, the first thing he felt was a sense of helplessness. It was an extreme discomfort and a great sense of loss. The situation in Zhongzhou State seemed to be still chaotic and intense, but in fact the academy and the new group had strangely calmed down. The Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State officially intervened in the Liaodong wandering meditation case. But after the Ministry of Supervision arrived in Liaodong, Bai Qingxian made some similar stable and harmonious voices in several official speeches. After all, Bai Qingxian was the speaker of Liaodong. The Ministry of Supervision had to pay attention to her opinions. Therefore, Liaodong was now in a strange stalemate. As for the Flourishing Age Fund, the joint investigation of various departments also came to a standstill. The Wang family of Beihai stepped forward to take over some of the mess left by the Flourishing Age Fund after the joint investigation. After sorting it out, it would naturally become a small gold mine. They were still waiting to continue to eat more profits from the Flourishing Age Fund. But as the investigation came to a standstill, their expectations seemed to be far away. The major groups were still holding back and keeping a wait-and-see attitude. Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun were completely silent. Li Huacheng didn't meet Li Tianlan, and he seemed to have put down his attention on Li Guangtu. In short, the whole Zhongzhou State strangely calmed down under the seemingly intense situation. And these things, with the rise of his status, no longer needed him to worry about them personally. The existence of military counselor did play a great role. It could be said that he was Li Tianlan's real right-hand man. After Li Tianlan set the strategic goal, the rest was operated by military counselor. There was no need for Li Tianlan to worry at all. In the first situation, Li Tianlan was very clear about what he had to do. What he needed was patience. Waiting. No matter what he wanted to do, all of this had to be after the election. And there was still more than half a year before the election. During this period of time, when he could only wait and do nothing, it was the time for Li Tianlan to relax and enjoy life leisurely. But he didn't know how to enjoy life at all, nor could he adapt to the leisure of doing nothing at the moment. He really didn't know what to do. Li Tianlan casually put down the fishing rod in his hand and sighed. It's boring. I can't get interested in anything. It's a little boring. With his strength at this level, the progress of martial arts had been extremely slow. Meditation didn't work at all. Now he was completely pursuing the most comfortable state of martial arts. When he was completely relaxed, with himself as the center, everything within tens of thousands of meters was under his absolute control. Not only every grass and tree, but even every wisp of airflow, he knew it like the palm of his hand. His sword energy casually enveloped the entire Emperor Dong's palace and adjusted the temperature in the Emperor Dong's palace according to his will. Within the scope of his sword energy, he could turn midsummer into cold winter into early spring, cool breeze in the stuffy Emperor Dong's palace, and he could also make drizzle in the Emperor Dong's palace under the scorching sun. To put it bluntly, this sounded incredible, but in fact, it was the sublimation of the four realms of martial arts. It was a further and deeper application of the four realms of martial arts. Now he was fishing here, but in fact he knew every fish in the artificial lake like the palm of his hand. He even knew how many bubbles they spat. As long as he wanted, he could catch all the fish in the artificial lake with his eyes closed. What was the point of sitting here? Qin Weibai glanced at him and said bitterly, "You think I'm annoying, don't you? You think it's boring to stay with me?" No. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. "I just think fishing is boring. Why don't we go back?" "Go back for what? Do you want to bully me again?" Qin Weibai tilted her head and looked at him. Her eyes became more and more aggrieved. "It's boring to be with me. That's not what you said when you played with me last night. Do you only find it interesting in bed? When you're tired of playing with me, are you going to kick me out? What nonsense are you talking about?" Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He subconsciously reached out and pinched Qin Weibai's pink earlobe. "I just feel I'm not used to it now. It's a waste of time. Maybe it's because I haven't really experienced these things before. I don't really understand the so-called freedom when I'm so idle. You basically ignored me these days when we were together. Except for working hard in bed, you didn't coax me." Qin Weibai shook her head and let Li Tianlan pinch her earlobe and complain. "Yeah, I'm in a daze all day. If I stay like this, I feel like a fool." Li Tianlan sighed softly and suddenly said, "What on earth did Li Huacheng say to you that day?" On the day Qin Weibai came back, she talked with Li Huacheng for nearly 3 hours. No one knew what they talked about. Even Han Xinyan, who went with Qin Weibai, couldn't hear the content of their conversation because Ma Si asked her to drink tea. But Li Tianlan could clearly feel that since that conversation, the battle between the Academy and the Flourishing Age Fund seemed to have eased, although it still seemed to be at loggerheads. In fact, both sides had maintained a restrained attitude. "I just tested his trump card." Qin Weibai leaned against Li Tianlan lazily and said softly, "If I'm not wrong, he should take the initiative to talk to you in the near future. After the talk, the relationship between us will become clear, and the next election should be smoother." Li Tianlan moved his hand around the slender waist in his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "I asked, what on earth did you talk to him about?" Qin Weibai's body trembled slightly. She blushed and twisted her body. She whispered, "He's still outside. How dare you resist?" Li Tianlan moved again and said with a smile, "There's no one around. What are you afraid of? If you don't tell the truth, believe it or not, I will punish you on this ship. Tell me, what on earth did you talk about?" "I won't say." Qin Weibai pressed her lips tightly and hummed weakly. "I do know Li Huacheng's trump card, but so far, he hasn't made up his mind. There are still variables. It's not a good time to say it now. It's better to wait for a while and let him talk to you himself. It's too boring to wait." Li Tianlan chuckled and unscrupulously felt the touch of softness on his fingertips. Qin Weibai lowered her head and gently bit Li Tianlan's arm. She said with a cry, "I didn't bring other clothes." Li Tianlan was indifferent. "How about this? I still have a card in my hand. This card can make Li Huacheng make up his mind quickly. In a few days at most, I promise he will take the initiative to come to you, okay?" Li Tianlan smiled with satisfaction, took out a piece of paper, and wiped his fingers. The delicate fragrance on the ship seemed to be stronger. Li Tianlan held the woman next to him in his arms again. "Open your mouth." Qin Weibai twisted her body, wanting to resist but also welcome. "Orange," Li Tianlan said. Qin Weibai, who felt weak all over and blushed, reached out her trembling hand to pick up an orange and peeled it clumsily. Her eyes were blurred and in a trance, and her body trembled slightly unconsciously. A piece of orange with its tangerine veins was sent into his mouth. Li Tianlan ate the orange and gently bit Qin Weibai's soft fingers. He said vaguely, "How to deal with Li Kuang Tu? Do you have any suggestions? The numbness on her fingers made Qin Weibai tremble again. Leaning against him, she was like a devil and couldn't resist at all. It was like the forest on the night when she came from Tianan to Emperor Dong's palace. It was like Li Tianlan's dishonest claws just now. It seemed that she didn't know when she had been so obedient to him, let him bully her, and was completely controlled. Qin Weibai, who was scolding herself in her heart, bit her red lips, forced herself to cheer up, and murmured, "I don't know. You decide." She took her fingers back, picked off the tangerine veins on the orange, shook her head hard, and whispered, "When Li Huaqing came to you, you knew what to do. It is true that he has cards up his sleeve, but my suggestion is you can't believe everything he says, but you can't ignore it." Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully. Qin Weibai leaned closer to Li Tianlan and said in a soft voice, "It's so boring." Li Tianlan opened his mouth and was about to say something, but he suddenly smelled a hint. He chuckled and grabbed the fishing rod again. "I think it's okay. Fishing and cultivating one's mind are good." Qin Weibai gently gritted her teeth and looked at Li Tianlan. She became more and more resentful, and her body leaned closer to him. Li Tianlan was unmoved. "Bad guy, are you fishing or keeping me in suspense?" Qin Weibai gently pinched him. Her light voice seemed to be coquettish and pleading, very implicit and very seductive. "Go back. Beg me." Li Tianlan chuckled. "You're going to humiliate me again, aren't you? You're always like this. You were like this the first time. You even hit me and scolded me. You're a bad guy, you agreed yourself." Li Tianlan smiled and said, "And I didn't scold you. You admitted it yourself. I was trying to please you." Qin Weibai said bitterly, "I'm not coquettish at all. And the first time I didn't agree, and I didn't." She suddenly frowned, her eyes were in a trance, and her face became a little pale. Li Tianlan was also stunned. He looked at Qin Weibai and gradually frowned. Qin Weibai, who would bravely look into his eyes in the past, avoided his gaze and turned to look into the distance. Her eyes were a little unfocused. Some small fun between husband and wife suddenly became silent. An incomparably deep light flashed in Li Tianlan's eyes. Qin Weibai's face became paler and paler, without any blood. Silence continued on the boat. The surrounding rain seemed to be a little messy. "Tianlan." After nearly 10 minutes, Qin Weibai said softly, "I want to go back." Li Tianlan held the fishing rod and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 1245. There were very few so-called small clinics in Emperor Dong's palace, which was like a large construction site. At present, except for a large general hospital in the city center, there were some regular private hospitals similar to sanatoriums, which belonged to Emperor Dong's palace. Ning Qiansheng had implemented the free medical care plan in Xianyuan City more than a year ago. As long as the official residents of Xianyuan City were treated in the regular hospitals in Xianyuan City, no matter if they had a fever, a cold, or a serious illness. In this way, the so-called private clinics had almost disappeared. Because of this, when Tianlan Clinic, a small clinic with a coquettish and even bold name, officially opened inside Emperor Dong's palace, it almost caused a sensation in the whole palace. Many people even thought that Emperor Dong had been bored recently, so he opened a clinic in his home and became a doctor. No one thought that this small clinic was a provocation. If the clinic was opened outside Emperor Dong's palace and was named after Emperor Dong, the sign of the clinic would probably be smashed as soon as it was put up. However, when such a small clinic appeared inside Emperor Dong's palace with the sign of Emperor Dong's palace, everyone knew that it must be done by their own people, or at least with the acquiescence of Emperor Dong, or even by Emperor Dong himself out of boredom. Tianlan Clinic was not small. The main building was a detached villa with 4 floors above and below the ground, located in the garden area of the central area of Emperor Dong's palace. The scenery was elegant. The basement floor stored medicinal materials and medical equipment. The first floor was the outpatient hall and pharmacy. Infusions and injections could be done here. The second floor was the ward. A dozen or so wards were arranged in a standard way, and the largest bedroom was even hung with the sign of Donghuang's special VIP room. The third floor was the laboratory, bedroom, and study of the clinic owner. The clinic had been open for less than a week, but there was an endless stream of patients every day. Many people were not sick, but they came to pretend to be sick with the idea of getting close to Emperor Dongwang. Then they were disappointed to find that the boss of the clinic was not Emperor Dongwang, nor was he a senior of Emperor Donghuang's palace who had a close relationship with Emperor Dongwang, as they had expected. Instead, it was a young fat man who looked unfamiliar, who smiled every day and looked easy to talk to. As a result, the clinic's business quickly became cold. Xianyuan Wushang didn't take it seriously and just stayed in the clinic. Strictly speaking, he just stayed in the clinic. In less than a week since the clinic opened, he didn't go out at all. When there were patients, he would prescribe some medicine. When there were no patients, he would just stay in the clinic, play games, watch movies, sleep, and daydream. He ordered 3 meals a day from the F&B department using the internal app of Emperor Dong's palace. In the past 5 or 6 days, he didn't eat much, but he had consumed nearly 10 boxes of cola and gained 2 or 3 kilograms. He was developing from a little fatty to a big fatty. The connection with Li Tianlan was suddenly cut off. His connection with Xing Tian was suddenly cut off. Xianyuan Wushang immersed himself in the small clinic that he was very satisfied with. He played games and crazily spent money, watched movies, and crazily complained. It was a happy and boring life. He was using this method to fade away from Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan as quickly as possible, patiently waiting for the right time. However, after a few days of this carefree life, Xianyuan Wushang felt that something was wrong. To be exact, it started last night. The clinic was already closed at that time, and Xianyuan Wushang was sitting in front of the computer excitedly, instructing the virtual character in the virtual online game, who was dressed in godly equipment, to go to the instance dungeon. A faint uneasiness emerged from the depths of his heart without warning. This uneasiness began to grow stronger and stronger. He was restless and didn't sleep well all night. Xianyuan Wushang knew something was wrong, or something was going to happen. He had the most critical authority. Even if the real environment had almost completely blocked the earth at this time and suppressed his role, intuition was always there. The sudden uneasiness must mean that something was going to happen, or it had already happened. Xianyuan Wushang didn't sleep well all night. He frowned and analyzed, but he still couldn't figure out what was wrong. Now, the most worthy of his attention was undoubtedly Li Tianlan. But Xianyuan Wushang was very sure that there was nothing wrong with Li Tianlan. Now he had officially embarked on the journey back, and everything was going well. He was waiting for the next opportunity to guide him. Next, what was worth his attention was outside the Earth. The space-time corridor, the War God Realm, the Emperor Palace. But he just paid attention to it. The destruction of the neutral camp was close at hand and couldn't be stopped. The Princess Royal of the space-time corridor came here first, which was enough to prove this. But whether it was his father, the war god, or the human emperor who hadn't officially taken action, they would all die, but they would never die so quickly. The war between the stars was not even a warm-up so far. According to the ordinary people's concept of time, it would take at least hundreds of years for it to completely end. And Qin Weibai was now in Emperor Dong's palace, which meant that the sister-in-law of the Lin clan headquarters wouldn't have too much problem. He had left a test bench in the sister-in-law's consciousness. If she really had a problem, the test bench would give him a clear warning. If there was no problem, what else could there be? Jiang Shangyu? The news of Unknown's death could be confirmed. The war god personally took action and also used a divine form that Li Tianlan hadn't activated. In any case, Unknown couldn't have survived. Jiang Shangyu did have a great advantage, but he couldn't be a threat at all in the near future. The real environment was the same for them. Xianyuan Wushang was currently in a state of being blocked, which meant that Jiang Shangyu couldn't threaten Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Tianzong? If something unexpected happened to Wang Tianzong, the saint who was currently responsible for treating Wang Tianzong would definitely tell Lin Shi as soon as possible. And Lin Shi would also pass the news to him and Xing Tian as soon as possible. So Wang Tianzong was not a problem. No matter how Xianyuan Wushang thought about it, he couldn't figure out where the problem was. He thought about it all night. After breakfast, he didn't bother to go to the bedroom on the 3rd floor, so he directly fell asleep in front of the computer. It was lunchtime when he was woken up by the phone. The clinic was quiet and cold, and no one visited it in the morning. Xianyuan Wushang rubbed his eyes and answered the phone. He yawned and said hello. On the other end of the phone, Xing Tian's thunderous voice sounded low and confused. Your Highness, I don't feel good. Xianyuan Wushang's heart sank for no reason, and his sleepiness disappeared instantly. If his uneasiness yesterday was just an accident, it was obviously a little unusual that Xing Tian, who also had the authority, also had a premonition. What's going on? Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. I don't know. Xing Tian's voice was hoarse. There's nothing unreasonable in my logic. I don't know what's wrong. Xianyuan Wushang's eyes kept flickering. Both of them had a premonition, but they didn't know what was going on. In this case, it probably meant that the thing that made them uneasy hadn't happened yet. But what on earth was it? Come to me. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a moment and said slowly. Xing Tian said yes and hung up the phone. Xianyuan Wushang went into the bathroom and washed his face with cold water. Then he picked up the phone and dialed number. After a long wait, the phone was connected. Lin Shi's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. What's up? Where are you? Xianyuan Wushang frowned. In addition to Lin Shi's voice, there was continuous noise on the phone. The apostle is messing with his bass. I can't have a look. What's the matter? When did you become interested in his things? Xianyuan Wushang asked. Lin Shi chuckled and didn't say anything. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a moment and said directly, I always feel that something is going to happen. Have you encountered any problems recently? Although Lin Shi and Li Tianlan were destined to stand on opposite sides in this case, no matter what, whether it was Xianyuan Wushang or Lin Shi, the most important purpose of their coming here was to ensure Li Tianlan's smooth return. In this matter, there was naturally nothing that the two sides couldn't communicate. His authority was different from Lin Shi's, so there were naturally differences. At least, Lin Shi didn't have this kind of premonition that didn't involve himself. Lin Shi was silent for a moment and seemed a little confused. What do you think? Xianyuan Wushang paused and said calmly. Xing Tian reminded me. Xing Tian doesn't have enough authority. Under the suppression of the real environment, isn't it normal for his premonition to be chaotic? Lin Shi said lightly. His premonition can't be wrong. Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. Just because Xing Tian is actually not a human? Lin Shi laughed. You should be your pen, right? Or your logical model. In other words, you're Xing Tian, right? Xianyuan Wushang's eyes suddenly narrowed. He held the phone and was silent for half a minute. Then he said lightly, How did you find out? I found out when I fought with King Wei in the starry sky. In fact, that place still can't get rid of the suppression of the real environment. Whether it's King Wei, Yumi, or Saint, our real combat strength is less than 1/3 of our peak state. But Xing Tian's authority is 2 levels lower than ours, but the effect he exerts is somewhat incredible. This is obviously not normal. Lin Shi said lightly, and the name Xing Tian itself is a bit strange. He is the ancient war god of the human clan. If he has nothing to do with that person, under the attention of the will of the world, who would dare to give him this name? Also, when we were chatting, we once talked about returning. We have only been fighting in the divinity realm for a short time, and our foundation is weak. But the space-time corridor is different. Only then did I realize that you, the Ninth Prince, look like a harmless saint, but in fact, I am far from your match. Who knows how many times you have returned? The title of saint is just your authority that is exposed to the outside world. If Xing Tian is really Xing Tian, then it is impossible that he has not reached the 7th level of authority by now. But if you are the return of the ancient war god, all this can be explained. Xianyuan Wushang's expression was somewhat indifferent. So, Your Highness, the Ninth Prince, in fact, there are no 2 guides at all. From the beginning to the end, the space-time corridor has only prepared 1 guide for His Majesty, and that is yourself. Xing Tian is the core of your observer authority, right? Only in this way can you be sure that your feeling is not wrong. TSK, you should have returned more than once, right? I am very curious about your 3rd authority. Is it martial arts? There is no point in saying this, Xinyuan Wushang said blandly. The most important thing is that now I can be sure that there is something wrong at present, but I do not know what the problem is. Lin Shi also fell silent. After a while, he slowly said, "The only thing I can be sure of is that the problem is not with me. I can be sure of this." Xinyuan Wushang was thoughtful. He did not doubt Lin Shi's words. Although people who climbed on the path of martial arts did not have an almost omnidirectional premonition like him, they were extremely sensitive to their own instincts. It was a basic quality to seek good fortune and avoid bad luck. In the current environment, if Lin Shi's instincts did not remind him of anything, then there would be no problem on his side. But what on earth was the problem? Something happened after we came here, or even before we came here, something might have happened. Jiang Shangyu's existence made any possibility possible. Is it possible that the location of Miracle City was exposed a long time ago? So, Lin Shi slowly analyzed. You mean the Order Camp's expedition? Xinyuan Wushang shook his head subconsciously. Impossible. Their top experts can't act at will. Even if there is an expedition, it is only at the peak of the apostle level. The heaven-deceiving king guards the rotating galaxy. If the expedition really started, the warning would have come long ago. A peak expert who deceives authority, even if he is not as good as the eldest princess, is enough to do too many things. Lin Shi was silent. In fact, in the face of the enemy, the heaven-deceiving king did have too many ways, including deceiving distance, deceiving perception, and even deceiving the enemy's thoughts. If he just wanted to guard the Miracle City, he could play tricks. At the very least, he had time to send a warning. If the so-called long-range expert had not yet approached the rotating galaxy, it would not have caused Xinyuan Wushang to feel uneasy. So the problem was still not this. Then what the hell is it? Xinyuan Wushang felt a headache and a little scared. There was obviously a problem, but he could not find it. This undoubtedly meant that when the problem happened, there might be unexpected trouble. I'm hanging up. Xinyuan Wushang hammered his forehead, said simply, and hung up the phone. He walked to the window and looked into the distance through the flowers in front of the villa. In the distance, a pleasure boat was floating on the artificial lake in Emperor Dong's palace. It was drizzling outside, and the sword energy was floating in every corner of Emperor Dong's palace. On the pleasure boat, Xinyuan Wushang could see Li Tianlan and Qinwei by there, loving each other, but he could not see what they were doing. Xinyuan Wushang looked at the lake dully, as if his mind had gone to another world. The door of the clinic was pushed open from the outside. Xinyuan Wushang turned his head slightly. It was not Xing Tian, but a beautiful woman about 27 or 28 years old. The woman's face was slightly pale, and there was a hint of weakness in her voice. "Doctor, I'll prescribe some medicine for you, okay?" Xinyuan Wushang smiled. The woman looked confused. "But I haven't told you where I feel uncomfortable. No matter where you feel uncomfortable, you have to take medicine. There is no other way." Xinyuan Wushang shook his head. "But doctor, let me say it first. I'll prescribe you medicine first. You can talk as long as you want when you leave here, okay?" Xinyuan Wushang looked down and rummaged through the medicine box. The woman's face grew paler, and her voice seemed to tremble. She said hoarsely, "Are you crazy?" She turned and walked to the door, cursing the quack in her heart. A small bottle was thrown from behind her. The woman turned around subconsciously, and with a little coldness in her hand, she grabbed the bottle. She was a civil servant in Emperor Dong's palace, and she was in charge of intelligence gathering and sorting out on the third floor of the castle. She looked slim and delicate, but she was also a graduate of the Sky Academy. There were many women like her in Emperor Dong's palace, who looked delicate but were actually very fierce. In a few months, there would only be more women like her. 3 times a day, 1 pill each time. Take it with warm water. Just take it later. Xinyuan Wushang smiled gently. Of course, if you don't believe me, just throw it away when you go out. The pale woman looked at Xinyuan Wushang with a complicated expression. She hesitated for a moment, and then slowly walked out with the bottle. Xinyuan Wushang walked back to the window, thinking carefully. The door of the clinic was pushed open again. Xing Tian walked in with heavy footsteps. He closed the door, pressed the button to close the clinic, and came to Xianyuan Wushang's side. He said in a low voice, "Your Highness, did you find anything wrong?" Xianyuan Wushang turned around and glanced at him. "There's nothing wrong in all aspects. It shouldn't have happened yet. It's normal that it hasn't happened, but there should be a direction," Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. He hooked his finger slightly, and a cube shining with a dark blue light flew out of Xing Tian's chest. It was a very small cube, or to be exact, a Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube shone with a dark blue light, and every ray of light seemed to be condensed with countless words and lines. This was Xianyuan Wushang's logic model. It was also the core of his authority system. Xianyuan Wushang took the Rubik's Cube and played with it. Then he took out an identical blue Rubik's Cube from his chest. The two Rubik's Cubes attracted each other and instantly merged into one. The two Rubik's Cubes instantly expanded several times. It no longer looked like a Rubik's Cube, but a cube with countless intricate structures inside. The inside of the cube was filled with many tiny structures, and glowing gears spun slightly. Moving, a large number of seemingly meaningless words were constantly surging inside. And these words, which ordinary people couldn't see or understand, became stories in Xianyuan Wushang's eyes. All of the stories were closely connected, and there were no logical loopholes. "So, what's going on?" he muttered to himself. Under normal circumstances, since he had a premonition, even if there weren't any loopholes in his logic model, there would at least be signs. As the ninth prince of a space-time corridor, there was almost nothing he couldn't pay attention to, and there were no secrets he couldn't understand. The neutral camp was different from the other two camps, and he and Lin Shi were also different. Lin Shi's foundation was too shallow. Even if he was talented, he still needed to accumulate experience. In fact, Lin Shi was right. If he really fought without any scruples, Xianyuan Wushang could fight a group of Lin Shi with all his strength. This was the real combat strength formed by the control of authority after returning several times. This time, Lin Shi was the ninth prince of the corridor of time and space. It was also because he became Li Tianlan's guide that he was able to enter the core of the corridor of time and space. But in fact, before he died last time, he was already one of the core figures of the corridor of time and space. At this stage, the corridor of time and space had no secrets for him. Others might have secrets, but he knew everything related to the stability of the human clan. Since he knew something, it would exist in the logic model he formed. So as long as he had a premonition, his logic model would show signs. In other words, if something happened that didn't appear in his logic model, it proved that it wasn't something he paid attention to and naturally wouldn't arouse his premonition. But now he had a premonition, but his logic model didn't move. What did this mean? The suppression of the real environment? This was too exaggerated. Did anything happen to you recently? Xianyuan Wushang asked. Xing Tian shook his head silently and looked at the cube in Xianyuan Wushang's hand. No. He was now the leader of a patrol team in Emperor Dong's palace, in charge of 4 team members. He patrolled for 8 hours a day and didn't do any specific work. He just wandered around Emperor Dong's palace. Now Li Tianlan was in Emperor Dong's palace, and every corner of the palace was covered by his sword energy. What problem could there be? Even if there was a problem, Li Tianlan could solve it with a casual move. So now Xing Tian really had nothing to do. He talked with several team members symbolically, and after work, except for 8 hours of patrolling, he basically slept for 15 hours. He encountered everything. That's really strange. Xianyuan Wushang muttered to himself and pulled out a jet-black writing brush from Xing Tian's chest. The brush changed in his hand and became a pencil. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a while and pointed at the logic model in front of him with the pencil. The blue light on the logic model shone slightly, and inside it, a tiny gear that was hard to see with a microscope turned gently. A small part of the gear turned into an extremely thick book. Xianyuan Wushang opened it silently. The book was full of words. To be exact, it was a story. It was a story that didn't have much content, but it had all sorts of details. Xianyuan Wushang read it quietly. The story was purely handwritten, and the pencils were extremely clear. The story was about a young man named Li Tianlan who left a camp on the border with an admission notice. He carried countless secrets and the hope of a declining family on his back. Under the secret attention of many people, he came to a city called Huiding, where he met a woman named Qin Wei Bai, and a series of events happened. From a bystander's point of view, this story was not up to standard because it was too messy and inexplicable, and there was no such thing as a protagonist or a supporting role. Every word, every picture, every word, every action, every person who appeared in the story, every sentence, every action, why he said this, why he did this, all of it had a lot of descriptions similar to narration. All the inner activities of Li Tianlan in the story. All the behind-the-scenes planning of Qin Wei Bai in the story. All of them were clearly outlined in the most detailed description. So it was so verbose that it gave people a splitting headache. Moreover, the timeline in the story was extremely messy. It would often jump from 1 second to several decades ago. It would even constantly affect one's worldview and jump to another time and space. Many times, some of the dialogues in the book could not even be determined if they were spoken or imagined. Xinyuan Wushang read the story quietly, watching the Sky Academy, watching the final battle of East Island, and watching the chaos in Snow Country. The handwriting in the story began to blur from clear, from neat to messy. Xinyuan Wushang frowned. During the chaos in Snow Country, the story already had problems that couldn't be adjusted. Large patches of alterations kept appearing. Countless clearly written content disappeared inexplicably, and the rest of the story began to be intermittent. The irresistible pressure of the world's will and the real environment directly pressed down when the story had problems. The whole story began to become fragmented, so the structure became more and more messy, and the overall structure of the story was on the verge of collapse under the absolute pressure of the real environment. It seemed that some content that had been written or not written would be completely erased by the real environment at any time. So the whole story began to change, and the content that should not have appeared replaced a large amount of content that would disappear after the whole story was written. The whole story began to become more messy, and a large amount of unreasonable content made the whole story stumble. Between the lines, one could see the indignation and impetuosity that could not be vented, and the helplessness of being caught off guard and unprepared in the face of the suppression of the real environment. The story continued to develop and deviate after the chaos in Snow Country. Xinyuan Wushang continued to read faster and faster. He watched the people in the story sweep across Beihai, watched the people in the story leave the desert prison, watched the situation in the story begin to stalemate in Zhongzhou State, and watched the people in the story return to their Emperor Dong's palace. He saw the Emperor Dong's palace in the story was raining, and the sword energy was flying. The man and woman who supported the story were boating on the lake, snuggling up to each other. The perspective of the story zoomed out, and in front of a window in a detached villa, a fat man in the story was also reading the story in his hand. An indescribable chill suddenly rushed out of Xinyuan Wushang's heart, freezing his brain and heart. He held the pen, and it seemed that he wanted to continue writing the story, but the problem in his heart was completely exposed at this moment. In his sight, on the lake in the distance, a gently drifting boat began to approach the shore. Li Tianlan stood at the bow of the boat. Qin Wei Bai stood behind him, as if she wanted to approach, but she was hesitating, and her face was pale. The picture began to become clear. The premonition that had been making him uneasy screamed wildly to remind him. Finally, the ominous feeling was shattered. Xinyuan Wushang's heart trembled, and he subconsciously lowered his head. He did not know when, but the pencil in his hand had begun to sketch in the book, and a new chapter of the story had been formed. The content of the story was completely reflected in his eyes. It could be erased, but could not be changed. The corner of Xinyuan Wushang's mouth moved. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth. "Your Highness!" Xing Tian held Xinyuan Wushang's body. All the premonitions of crisis in his mind had disappeared, because the fact had happened, and it had become a reality. Xinyuan Wushang breathed rapidly, and he murmured, "Oh no, it's over." Xing Tian glanced at the book that had been pulled out of the logic model. The book, stained with Xianyuan Wushang's blood, glowed with an incomparably hazy light. The moment Xianyuan Wushang put down the pencil, the square logic model began to shrink, and the book automatically closed and was sucked in. With just a glance, Xing Tian had already seen the story that Xianyuan Wushang had just unconsciously continued to weave under the arrangement of the world's will. It was just a new chapter. The chapter name, Memory Disorder. Xing Tian's pupils instantly contracted. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.